I'm really glad to meet you, Alan.
Shall we? Yvette? Okay. Good morning and welcome to the City Planning Commission public meeting for Wednesday, May 23rd, 2018.
Okay. Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held at NYC City Planning Commission hearing room, Lower Concourse, 120 Broadway. Today is Wednesday, May 23rd, 2018. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chair Lago. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Capelli.
Here.
Commissioner Cerullo. Commissioner Delausse.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Efron.
Here.
Commissioner Knight. Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Marin.
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, May 9th, 2018.
On the minutes, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? The minutes are approved.
Scheduling. On calendar numbers 1 through 7, we have resolutions for adoption, scheduling Wednesday, June 13, 2018, for a public hearing to be held at NYC City Planning Commission hearing room, Lower Concourse, 120 Broadway.
On the resolutions, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The resolution.
In as much as I've just come on board, I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner. The resolutions are adopted.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 15. Excuse me. Borough of the Bronx, calendar numbers 8, 9, and 10. Calendar number 8, CD8 N180268ZAX. Calendar number 9, N180269ZAX. Calendar number 10, N180270ZCX. In the matter of applications for the grant of authorizations and for the grant of a certification concerning 3061 Cynic Place, La Frida residence for adoption on calendar numbers 8, 9, and 10. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli.
Abstention?
Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar numbers 8, 9, and 10 have been adopted. Borough of the Bronx, calendar numbers 11 and 12. Calendar number 11, CD8 N180258ZAX. Calendar number 12 N180259ZAX. In the matter of applications for the grant of authorizations concerning Turok residents for adoption on calendar numbers 11 and 12. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli. Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar numbers 11 and 12 have been adopted. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 13, CD8 N180316ZCX. In the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning SAW Academy ELC building for adoption on calendar number 13. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli.
Abstention?
Commissioner Delausse.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 13 has been adopted. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 14, CD 13, N180317PXK. In the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for Human Resources Administration. For a favorable report on calendar number 14. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli.
Abstention?
Commissioner Delauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 14. Excuse me. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 15, CD3, N180193, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 3 Bartlett Avenue for adoption on calendar number 15. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli.
Abstention?
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 15 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 16, CD3, N180275, RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 52 Stafford Avenue for adoption on calendar number 16. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli.
Abstention?
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 16 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 19. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 17 and 18. Calendar number 17, CD2, C180244HAK. Calendar number 18, C180245ZSK. A public hearing in the matter of applications for a UDAP designation, project approval, and disposition of city-owned property, and for the grant of a special permit concerning 1019 Fulton Street.
Okay, we will hear from the applicant team for 10 minutes. The speakers as listed are Felipe Cortez, Jacqueline Scarinci, I believe it is, and Emmanuel Demore.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Felipe Cortez, a Bureau Planner at Brooklyn Planning with the New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development. I am here to introduce the land use application for 1019 Fulton Street, a mixed-use project that will result in 50 mixed-income rental units and ground floor commercial retail space in Clinton Hill. Out of the 50 mixed-income rental units, 15 units will be permanently affordable. I am joined here excuse me, by Lynn Sang, Director of HPD Brooklyn Planning, Jacqueline Scarinci from Ackerman LLP, and Emmanuel Damore from Afghan Architects. They will also be presenting on different aspects of the project. HPD, along with Fulton Star LLC, are seeking UDAP designation and project approval and disposition of city-owned land. In addition, the ULURP application is seeking a zoning special permit pursuant to zoning resolution 74533 to waive accessory off-street residential parking spaces required at the proposed development. Approval of the proposed ULURP actions will facilitate the development of an 8-story mixed-use building with approximately 50 mixed-income rental units and 6,094 square feet of ground floor commercial retail space. HPD is excited about this project as it provides a unique opportunity to develop much-needed permanently affordable housing and ground floor commercial retail space on city and privately owned land that has been vacant and underutilized for about 20 years. Moreover, HPD is excited about this project as it will help activate and increase foot traffic along this stretch of Fulton Street. The proposed 15 permanently affordable units help further the Mayor's Housing 2.0 plan to build and preserve 300,000 affordable housing units in 10 years. At this time, I would like to hand off the presentation to Jacqueline, who will provide further details regarding the development site's history and an overview of the proposed project.
So to provide context for why this area along the Fulton Business Improvement District has remained vacant for over 20 years, the site configuration that's shown here, it is 9 individual tax lots. And as you can see, the tax lots along Fulton Street are extremely narrow and shallow with a depth of 40 feet in some areas. So Fulton Star began assembling the sites in 2011, and it's taken 7 years to put this assemblage together. The city-owned portion of the lot is critical to the development as it is located on the eastern portion of the site, and it will anchor this development along Fulton Street, and the retail can wrap from Fulton Street along Downing Street, really making this part of the vibrant Fulton Business Improvement District. Additionally, the air rights that were purchased in 2015 allow the developer to build full on the lot. As I mentioned, the depth along these lots along Fulton Street are only 40 feet. So to have a very shallow building here, by merging the zoning lot, it enables the developer to build full on the lot to have legal light and air for all of the residential dwelling units. Additionally, this public-private partnership with the city allows the developer to maximize the affordable housing units. The city-owns lots make up approximately 21% of the total development site. And if they were developed separately, only approximately 8 dwelling units could be developed on these lots because only 1 unit could be developed per floor, because these lots are extremely narrow and they would have to have 2 means of egress. With this project and this public-private partnership, we are able to develop 15 permanently affordable housing units. The proposed project will be a new 8-story mixed-use building. It will have a total of 50,121 square feet of floor area, 6,094 square feet of ground floor retail along Fulton and Downing Street, total of 50 residential dwelling units, and 15 permanently affordable housing units. The developer worked with HPD to develop the AMI levels for this project, and it is more of a mixed income project. The developer will not be seeking private financing for the construction of the affordable housing units or subsidy for the ongoing maintenance of these units. 5 units will be at 70% AMI, 5 units at 80% AMI, and 5 units at 120% AMI. And I will now turn it over to Emmanuel Diamore to briefly describe the design of the building.
Good morning. Just to give a brief about the amenities that we incorporate available to all tenants of the buildings. We have laundry rooms on each residential floor, recreation rooms intended for the roof and the accessible terrace at the setbacks, outdoor patios, recreation room in the cellar, also bicycle in the cellar as well, bicycle storage. This is the plot plan. We sort of try to identify the existing building where we're borrowing air right from, fronting on Putnam Avenue, and the dark shaded area is the proposed building, 8 stories with a series of setbacks and recess, to also engage with the character of the neighborhood. The one thing that we like to emphasize is that corner, the triangle black entrance indicating the residential entrance all the way far on Downing Street, just to encourage the the access to the retail as much as possible. So on the next slide, we see the intended first floor retail space as a blank canvas, open, available to be subdivided as as required, and allowed to provide local retailers, either a single 6,000 square feet or multiple tenants. And then again, the depth of the building at the retail space, it's about 38 feet, which is something very common seen in local retailers. And again, the open plan intended for that use. You want to go over the next? I hand it back to Jackie Agnew. Thank you.
And then just to summarize, the Brooklyn Community Board 2 and Borough President both recommended approval of the application, and they made some recommendations that the applicant will be incorporating some of them into the project already. Local ground floor retail uses to work closely with the Fulton Business Alliance, FAB. The applicant has actually had a partnership with FAB since 2012 and continues to work with them to identify local retail tenants that would be appropriate for this neighborhood. Additionally, in terms of sustainability, to focus on the building envelope, the applicant will retain a sustainability consultant to have a very energy efficient building facade and envelope, and also to work with Brooklyn Community Board 2 and the Borough President's Office on maximizing local and MWBE hiring for subcontractors and trades. The architect is already an MWBE certified contractor. And then finally, to build on the partnership with Impact Brooklyn to make sure that community outreach for this project is robust to reach each of the, during the marketing and leasing of the affordable housing units. Any questions?
Commissioner De La Hoz.
Hi, good morning. It would be great to get a little bit of history of like how the project evolved. Because you've mentioned a few times the public-private partnership, and it seems like the permanent affordability is being achieved through a regulatory agreement rather than through voluntary or mandatory inclusionary housing. So I just want to understand that a little bit and how we got here, and are we going to be, I guess, does HPD anticipate us seeing more projects like this, where it's HPD bringing forward an application like this versus the private applicant? And then it would also be helpful to, the concerns about the AMI levels, I think, are real, and it'd be helpful to understand how these numbers were settled on.
Okay, I will answer the first part and the third part, I think, of your question. So for the first part, this project's located in a voluntary inclusionary housing area. So the developer could build on their sites as of right and provide no affordable housing. However, much better development can be made with the city-owned lots. And the actual voluntary inclusionary, there will be two regulatory agreements here. There will be the voluntary inclusionary housing regulatory agreement for the 10 units that are at 80% AMI and below. And then there will be a separate land disposition agreement with HPD where the 5 units that are at 120% AMI will be restricted permanently. And then also, your question about the AMI levels, because the developer here it's in a voluntary inclusionary housing area, and the AMIs in this area are, the census data that we have right now is that the Clinton Hill district has an AMI of 81,000, but that's from 2016, so it hasn't been adjusted for current AMI levels. And right now, the AMI levels for 2018 for a family of 4 is approximately 83,440. So that if the 2016 census data was updated, we believe it could be higher than what the AMI levels are for 80% and 70% AMI here. And this project was looked at as a mixed income project, and in working with HPD, and they can speak more to this point, there weren't a lot of projects that were reaching these AMI levels. I think because a lot of the HPD term sheets, they look at reaching lower AMI levels, and with 421A, there was a lot of 60% AMI units, so that was the original plan for this project, was to hit more of the moderate income AMI levels here. And I'll turn it over to Lynn from HPD.
Hi, Lynn Zhang. I wasn't called, but I did sign up as
You
part
can
of.
speak nonetheless.
Okay, thanks. Lynn Zhang from HPD. So for the most part, when we develop our public sites, it's through a competitive RFP process. But in the rare instances where we have a small site that is next to a larger privately owned assemblage, we do consider, negotiation with that developer or that owner so that the resulting project would be much better than what the public sites can generate on its own. And so to answer your question, if we do this very much, no, we don't. This is a really rare case because, we have done a fairly good job in developing a lot of the city-owned sites. We don't have that much sites left, but there are these scattered ones, right, that are throughout the city. And so this is one instance. And we have been in contact with the developer since 2012. This is a 6-year negotiation in the making, and I know 15 units of affordable housing doesn't seem like a lot, but I think to us, it seems getting to this point is a huge milestone because there was a lot of back and forth. So it started less than 15 units. It was, probably 12, and then it went up to 14, and then, we squeezed in an extra 15. So that's some of the background of how, this partnership was. And the question on the AMIs, it is true that these AMI, the proposed AMI, the affordable units are higher than what we generally do, but this is, I want to highlight, the city's not putting any subsidies into this project. So the 70%, 80%, 120% AMI units are going to be completely financed by the developer and the owner, and they would be permanently affordable. And those were the affordability levels that we reached. And we do believe the housing crisis is not just the low and the very low income, it's across the board that we're all feeling it. People went to college and have master's degree, they're not finding units that are super affordable to them. And so these will be locked in at these prices. So while they are higher than what we generally see, we thought it was at a good place that we can move ahead. And the borough president raised the point of, that the city lots alone can create 8 units, and then the developer can get 7 more units with inclusionary. And everybody's saying, it should be more, we should get more units. And the question, I think, that I like to bring up is, it's not so much what the city site can do by itself, but what the city site can do without what it can't do without the adjacent sites. So, they've been vacant for over 20 years. And I think if we had walked away from this negotiation, this partnership, it's unclear how we can develop those 2 small lots on its own. I don't know if that answers all your questions.
It does, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. You did anticipate at least one portion of my question. And I just want to state that I think this is a very positive project in so many ways, including how attractive the building is. And the partnership with the city makes a lot of sense. But given that the AMI levels are high, and I do agree that there is a market for that, and it's great that a private developer is taking it up. But given that they're high, and given that 21% of the site is city-owned, and recognizing fully what you just said about on its own it wouldn't work, but it is part of a larger package. And I just wonder if there's room, especially given the high AMIs, for a few additional units on the HPD regulatory agreement side.
I think, that's maybe a numbers question to see what they can do. And HPD, we're open to more affordable units, but that's where we, that's the number that we settled on, that we felt comfortable enough to move forward on, and I think it would have been difficult to try to get a few more.
And I apologize, perhaps my question is rhetorical, but I just put it out there as a concern.
No, we do hear that. We do hear that.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Let me introduce Commissioner Capelli, and then we'll come to
Yes, I'd just like to associate myself with Commissioner Efron's rhetorical question. I share the same curiosity.
Commissioner Marin.
I have a question for Lynn. Lynn, so I think I heard that only 5 of the units will be permanently affordable.
No, 15. All of them will be permanently affordable.
Yeah, thank you.
And that is in perpetuity, notwithstanding the fact that HPD is not providing subsidies.
Correct, in perpetuity. So in our other projects where HPD finances, they're not in perpetuity. They're 30 or 60 years regulatory terms. But as part of the negotiation, we wanted those 5 additional affordable units be permanently affordable, as well as the IH units.
Commissioner Marin?
Lynn, the young lady, I'm sorry, I don't know her name. She mentioned that, Jackie, that there's the voluntary inclusionary housing regulatory agreement, but she did state that the land development agreement only includes 5 units permanently affordable.
Yeah, because the regulatory agreement will also restrict the 10 units as permanently affordable. They're under 2 separate programs, so that's why they would have 2 separate agreements with HPD.
Okay.
Yeah, but they will all be permanently affordable.
I just wanted to make sure that was the case, so thank you for the clarification.
Okay, no problem.
Other questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Just one question. So is the developer paying the city for the lots?
At a nominal rate, so $1 a lot.
I'll just lower AMIs, please.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will next hear from, speaking in favor of the project, Philip Kellogg. Philip Kellogg.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. The Fulton Area Business Alliance, or FAB, is the business improvement district along Fulton Street in Brooklyn's neighborhoods of Fort Greene and Clinton Hill. Since our inception in 2009, a top economic development priority of FAB's has been the transformation of these vacant lots between Grand and Downing into a mixed-use development that includes ground floor commercial uses. FAB supports this ULURP application. For the city to be able to leverage these 2 small vacant lots to generate units of affordable housing beyond what is possible on lots 2 and 3 alone, plus dynamic ground floor commercial activity along Fulton Street all the way to the corner of Downing would be a major win for Fulton Street and the neighboring businesses and residents. FAB supports the request in the ULURP application to waive the retirement for off-street parking. One of the amazing things about Fulton Street in this section is how well served it is by mass transit, and perhaps most importantly, accommodating off-street parking in this project because of the site's limitations would decimate the ground floor commercial space and negatively impact potential benefits of the project to host businesses that best serve the community. In many conversations we've had with the developer over the years and in public meetings, the developer has been supportive of the vision for the ground floor space to be activated in ways that benefits the community as well as the residents. FAB's goals include having a variety of small businesses that will serve the community instead of one large chain or a single bank or a big box store that dominates an entire block. Fulton Street is a vibrant collection of independent businesses that reflect and serve the community. These small businesses are one reason why people live here, and every effort should be taken to maintain that feeling. FAB urges commissioners to support this ULURP application while respectfully requesting that the transfer of the city-owned lots include stipulations in writing that will help make sure that these goals are met. We were looking to the enhanced commercial district that was created for Columbus Avenue and Amsterdam Avenues on the Upper West Side for guidance. Some ideas and options to consider include stipulating that a minimum number of ground floor commercial units be created, placing limits on the frontage of any one establishment, ensuring the maximum square footage for any one commercial unit not exceed 2,000 square feet. Small businesses in this stretch of Fulton Street need additional support. We'd like to ask that stipulations include a cap on rent increases of no more than 3% per year and below market commercial rents during perhaps the first 5 years of a lease. And to best serve the community, FAB would also like to ask that there be limits on chain stores, however those are defined, but to limit those while still encouraging Brooklyn's entrepreneurs who are growing and expanding to locate on this section of Fulton Street. Finally, cultural and arts uses in this project would bring significant benefits to this stretch of Fulton Street, so close to the Brooklyn Cultural District. FAB would like to ask for a stipulation that a smaller unit, commercial unit, be made available for nonprofit cultural and arts organizations at below market rents. FAB enthusiastically supports this ULURP application, and we look forward to seeing the project realized. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Kellogg? Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi there.
Good morning.
You listed a lot, you have a long wish list
Yes.
there. I'm curious, to what extent you've had conversations with the developer, to what extent they have indicated they're amenable to some of those stipulations?
As to the specifics, no, but in general terms, we've had many, many conversations over the years, and the developers also made comments in public meetings in support of the idea of small businesses breaking up the space into smaller units that serve the community, also understanding that this is an area that's in transition and that it's not going to get top dollar right away because there's still a number of vacant lots in the area. So the developer has been very supportive of that, and we've had conversations. We've already started feeding ideas and local businesses that are struggling in their current situations as a possible alternatives into this new development. So we're very, not all developers will have that kind of conversation, and so we're enthused by that, but we would like it in writing.
And I mean, because some of that is, they could voluntarily agree to that. I mean, and that's sort of the question, is it something that ends up on our end, or is it something that can be done on your end?
Well, the thinking is that if it could be incorporated into the transfer documents for the city-owned lots as a stipulation, much in the way the affordable housing component will be put in writing, that we would have a better chance of seeing this happen and have it continue. And the borough president's recommendation included some language around that.
So when you mentioned the example on Amsterdam Avenue, are those, I'm unfamiliar with that. That's a precedent that has occurred.
That's right.
For some of those policies.
Yeah, as of 2012, I believe, and they were getting slammed with a lot of banks taking up an entire block or half a block, and so an enhanced commercial district was created. And some of those things that I listed, such as storefront maximums, square footage maximums, were part of that district. And I have my written testimony that includes a third sheet with a list of these specific dimensions that I could leave for the.
But I imagine not below market rents.
That
not a problem.
No, I know, that's a hypothetical. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Thanks for being here. I'm just wondering if, I think a number of the recommendations that you're laying out are things that are increasingly, advocates for small businesses in the city are indicating a number of those things. And I'm just wondering to what extent has FAB met with Councilmember Cumbo to discuss a number of these things?
Multiple times. Oh, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, multiple times. We've met with the council member very early on when the renderings were first put forth, and subsequently 2 or 3 times. And as recently as last week, we were having a conversation with her and the Department of Small Business Services and talking about these kind of issues specific to this project and others.
Great. May I have one more? Please. And I'm just wondering, the recommendation to break up the space, I think that'll certainly most likely make it easier to rent. I'm just wondering, what have you seen? Where's the demand right now on Fulton Street for what size spaces?
Great question. A lot of spaces are typically around 900 square feet, 950. And so there is a demand for slightly larger spaces. 1,350, 1,400 for some of our businesses that would be in between. So that in this space, if there were 4 units out of a 6,000 square foot space, that could create 3 or 4 units that would meet that.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on this item? If there is none, then the hearing is closed.
Okay. Borough of Queens, calendar number 19, CD 13, C140187 MMQ. A public hearing in the matter of an application for a city map amendment concerning the North Conduit Avenue demapping.
Our first speaker on this item is Dan Eggers. Speaking in favor.
Good morning, Vice Chair Knuckles, Commissioners. Dan Eggers, Land Use Attorney at Greenberg Trarg. I'm representing 21925 to 21901 North Conduit Avenue, located on the east side of Springfield Boulevard near the Belt Parkway in Queens Community District 13. This is the Conduit Plaza Shopping Center, which my client developed in 2013. How do I move to the next one?
Right.
I'm not familiar with the technology. How'd you do that? Thank you. All right. The buildings are on property my client owns. Most of the accessory parking, however, is a mapped but unbuilt portion of North Conduit Avenue that my client has been licensing through the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Since the license is temporary, in order for my client to be able to continue using the area for parking permanently, we've applied for the demapping and disposition of the parking area to my client. There we go. The parking area is 15,357 square feet. At the request of DOT, we are also applying to demap an approximately 3,300 square foot triangular shaped portion of the property on the east side so that the total area proposed to be demapped is 18,656 square feet. And here is the application map showing the proposed change to the city map. The area to be demapped is shown. As mentioned, the area to be demapped is currently used for permitted accessory parking, which is as of right, and if demapped, it will continue to be used for parking. No additional development is proposed. This area now has 42 parking spaces. There are 8 parking spaces elsewhere on the property for a total of 50 existing parking spaces. As a condition for the demapping and sale to my client, DOT has requested certain improvements to the parking area, which are shown here in this illustrative diagram. These primarily involve changes in curb cut location and configuration, and the addition of landscaping around the parking area. With these changes, the total number of parking spaces would decrease from 50 to 47. In sum, the application would allow the area to continue to be used for parking permanently with improved curb cuts and landscaping. I ask for your favorable consideration and welcome any questions.
A question: when the businesses of your client are not open, which is to say overnight, what is the extent of the access to this parking lot on the part of local residents?
The parking area, there's no barriers keeping anyone out. Whether or not people in the surrounding area use it overnight, I don't have that information, but I could get back to you on that.
Commissioner Commissioner Efron, and then Commissioner.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
One quick question. Is there any intention by your client to charge for parking on this location?
No.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dweck.
How far out do the retail leases go on the space?
Currently 20 years.
20 more years?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Eggers.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers on this item? There being none, the hearing is closed.
Borough of Queens, calendar number 20, CD2, C180243, PCQ. A public hearing in the matter of an application for the site selection and acquisition of property concerning Sunnyside Park.
From the Department of Parks and Recreation, Jose Lopez.
Good morning, Vice Chairman Knuckles and Commissioners. My name is Jose Lopez. I'm the Deputy Director of Parklands, which is essentially the real estate unit for the Parks Department. I'm here today to present to you an application by the Department of Parks and Recreation with the Department of Citywide Administrative Services as co-applicant for the acquisition of a privately owned parcel of land in Sunnyside, Queens for the development of a park. The project site is located along 39th Avenue. The address is 5202 39th Avenue in Sunnyside Gardens in Queens. And the site is a corner lot, which is approximately 10,000 square feet. And the surrounding area of the project site is primarily residential in character. It includes primarily 1 and 2 family homes and a lot of row houses. To the east of the project site, there's a commercial overlay that includes retail uses such as a restaurant, laundromat, grocery store. And then to the southeast of the project site, there's a large apartment building complex. This location. And then we also have Lawrence Virgilio Playground, which is a community park that is under the jurisdiction and management of the Parks Department. And directly to the north of the project site, we have the FIP Houses complex, which at one point actually owned the project site up to 2007. They owned the project site. And the project site previously was improved as a play area for the residents of the Fifth Houses. My understanding is that Fifth Houses used to have a daycare for the residents, or the kids used to use this area as their play area. And the site previously was improved with open air pavilion. It had some other play equipment such as slide, swings, and it also had a large shed that contained the bathrooms. And then in 2007, the current owner purchased the property. Also would like to mention that the project site is located within the Sunnyside Garden Special Plant Preservation Community District, and also within the Sunnyside Landmark District. The Parks Department currently has funding for the acquisition of the site, and then any remaining funding will be used to develop the park. There's ample support in the community for the site to be acquired for park development. The Sunnyside Gardens Preservation Alliance has been very instrumental in advocating for the site to be acquired by the city, as well as the local council member. And here you can see some photos of the current condition of the site. So the community is very eager to see this site improve. And now I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Jose. What is the size of the parcel again?
Approximately 10,000 square feet is a corner lot.
Okay. Other questions? Commissioner Capelli, Commissioner De La Ruz.
Yes. What is the vision of the Park Department for developing this site?
Our vision is, if the city were to acquire the site, we will work very closely with the community, particularly the community board, and that will be something that our capital division will be in charge of. So they will be working on the design and also working very closely to design the park. And in this case, since it's a corner lot, we have the ability to develop the site hopefully with kind of like a community park, some passive uses, and also it depends what the community really wants to see in the site. So we'll definitely take that into consideration.
And have you heard from the community board as to what they would like to see there?
The idea is that that would be a community park with some passive uses and also perhaps some just like passive use. I mean, that's what I heard in terms from the community.
Thank you.
Commissioner De La Ruz.
First, thanks for being here. I know it's not every day you get to acquire parkland. I'm just wondering if you know, when the current owner, the one that acquired it in 2007 from Phipps, what was their original intent?
I mean, the original intent was, to develop the site with residential housing.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
Okay.
As I mentioned, the original intent of the current owner was to develop the site with housing, but given that it is a landmark, within a landmark district, at the same time as within the Sunnyside Garden Special Plan Preservation District, I mean, there are stricter requirements in terms of what he can actually build on the site. So I think he has some difficulty in developing the site given those constraints in place. But the community has always wanted the site to, be improved as a park. I mean, there's still people living in the community that remember when they actually play in this site, and they still remember when it was really open to the public and they were able to use it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Jose. Good to see you.
Likewise, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Randall there.
Good morning, Chairman Knuckles, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Randall Vare. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sunnyside Gardens Preservation Alliance. Since 2009, our organization has worked with over 300 Woodside and Sunnyside neighbors and others to reopen this historic parkland on the corner of 39th Avenue and 50th Street. And we've been working to reopen it as a garden park for public enjoyment. We're grateful for the very demonstrative support of former Parks Commissioner Adrian Benap, New York City Council member Jimmy Van Bramer, Queens Borough President Melinda Katz, New York State Assembly members Brian Barnwell, Marge Markey, and Catherine Nolan, New York State Senator Michael Gianaris, and Congressman Joe Crowley. As well, we are fortunate for the active counsel of our local tenants and homeowners associations and such community organizations as Woodside on the Move, the Brooklyn Queens Land Trust, the Trust for Public Land, the New York Restoration Project, the Landmarks Preservation Commission, and Queens Community Board 2, which all have given us unanimous support for the park that we envision. While we enjoy in the community 3 large children's playgrounds, all within a 5 to 10 minute walk of this particular site, we lack a restful public green space that is characteristic of the surrounding neighborhood. A dedicated group of diverse members of the community have worked over 9 years to establish a broad and deep consensus for a passive garden park with walks and benches, native plants to attract birds and butterflies, a park that would honor the historic buildings which surround this space. We're eager to work with the Parks Department on the design for this park and to see it reopen for the benefit of all of the public. We respectfully request your endorsement for the purchase of this lot for a city park. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vare. Questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Actually, it's not so much a question as really thanks for the level of organization and commitment to realizing the vision, and you're one step closer.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we've included everybody in this process, and we're looking forward to move ahead.
Other questions?
Just have to say, as a former and really former member of this community board, it's really delightful to see everybody working together so positively, particularly in this historic area.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You don't mean to imply there was once dissension on the community board, do you?
It's one of the most exciting neighborhoods in that it is a little bit of everything. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, I actually, my wife and I have lived there for 27 years. And while we've seen it change, what has remained constant is the diversity of folks who live in that neighborhood, who are there for basically to make a better life for themselves and their families, and make it a great neighborhood. Continue to keep it a great neighborhood.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Eileen Connolly Goodwin.
Good morning. I'm the mom of 2 children who used this playground in the 1980s. It's been a beautiful open space that I just hope that you will consider keeping it, as opposed to allowing somebody to come in and develop it into something that we will probably never take advantage of, but we'll lose what we have right now, which is big, beautiful open space. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you for coming.
Thank you for hearing me.
Are there any other speakers on this item? There is not, then the hearing is closed.
Borough of Queens, calendar numbers 21 and 22. Calendar number 21, CD4, C180298ZMQ. Calendar number 22, N180099ZRQ. A public hearing in the matter of applications for a zoning map and zoning text amendment concerning 4031 82nd Street rezoning.
Okay, we're going to hear from the applicant team for 10 minutes, starting with Nora Martins and Seth Wright.
Hi, good morning. Oh, there it is. I was just going to ask. If I could get the presentation up on the board. My name is Nora Martins from Ackerman LLP, Land Use Council representing the applicant for this rezoning. I'm joined by Seth Wright, as you mentioned, from Philip Habib and Associates, who will address, subsequent to my presentation, the traffic concerns and the proposed parking and loading on Baxter Avenue. As you can see from the area map that's up on the screen, the site is located at the corner of Baxter, Ithaca, and 82nd Streets, just south of Roosevelt Avenue in Community District 4. This is a real mixed-use neighborhood. You have dense residential development anchored by a commercial hub that runs along Roosevelt and 82nd Street. You can see from the map, the red highlights that commercial component, which is characterized by two-story commercial in this neighborhood. You can see to the south in the blue, the large Elmhurst Hospital complex, which is several buildings, 11 stories and 180 feet at the tallest. The site is transit-oriented, only 180 feet from the 7 train at 82nd and Roosevelt, and about a half mile from the M and the R trains at Elmhurst Avenue. You can see in this photo from 2014, the site was formerly occupied by the Jackson Heights Cinema and several one-story retail stores. The site is currently vacant. The existing zoning, which is C613, R6 with a C13 commercial overlay, would permit a 4.8 FAR for community facility, a 2 FAR for commercial, and a 2.43 FAR for residential, pursuant to the height factor regulations, which are permitted in the R6, the existing R6 zoning district. So there is no maximum contextual height limitation in the existing zoning district. There's also no inclusionary housing area, so there is no affordable housing requirement on this site currently. Interesting, actually, Community District 4 has no inclusionary housing designated areas, and this proposal will be the first mandatory inclusionary housing designated area in the community district. This massing shows a potential as-of-right development scenario, which would be a 10-story, 113-foot tall height factor building, approximately 104,000 square feet. And again, no affordable housing is required. The proposed land use actions include a zoning map amendment to rezone from the existing R6 C13 zoning district to a C45X, which is an R7X equivalent, together with a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area, coterminous with the rezoning area. We would be mapping option 1 and the deep affordability option. Originally, when this project came before the commission at certification, the proposed options were option 1 and option 2. The applicant has amended the application subsequent to feedback and discussions with community stakeholders, including Community Board 4, the Queensborough President, and Councilmember Moya. And they're now proposing mapping the deep affordability option and proposing to comply with that option, which would require 20% of the residential floor area to be permanently affordable at an average of 40% of AMI. It's approximately 24 units. And that AMI level is actually slightly below the average household income in Community District 4, which is approximately $44,865 for a household. In addition to compliance with the mandatory inclusionary housing requirement, the applicant is committed to providing additional affordability in the project and is working with Councilmember Moya to provide an additional 15% of the floor area, which is approximately 18 more units for a total of 42 units in the project affordable, at AMI levels ranging from 50% to 80%, with 5% at 50, 5% at 60, and 5% at 80% AMI. In addition to changes made to the affordability program based on the public feedback between certification and this hearing, other commitments have been made by the applicant, including an agreement with 32BJ for building service jobs, a commitment to not build a hotel, and a commitment to work with local stakeholders on local hiring initiatives for the retail space, such as job fairs. The zoning change map shows the proposed rezoning to the C45X, R7X equivalent with mandatory inclusionary housing. The C45X would permit a 5 FAR for community facility, a 4 FAR for commercial, a 6 FAR for residential. It's a contextual zoning district, so quality housing development is required, and there's a maximum height limitation of 145 feet. The overall FAR would be 6 permitted, compared to the 4.8 overall permitted in the existing zoning district. And the mandatory inclusionary housing would require provision of inclusionary housing as a condition of development of residential floor area at the site. The proposed C45X is a regional commercial center designation, which is appropriate here. This is not just a neighborhood shopping area serving local retail needs, although it is very much that. It also draws customers from a larger area. The site is located within the 82nd Street Business Improvement District, which includes nearly 200 businesses on 4 blocks. And part of their mission is marketing this neighborhood as a destination. Generally, C42 through C45 districts are mapped in similar, more densely populated areas, such as Steinway Street in Astoria and Main Street in Flushing. There is a C43, you can see it mapped just north of Roosevelt Avenue along 82nd Street. And the proposed C45X, however, has the R7X equivalent, which permits additional residential density and the affordable housing. The C43 that's located north of Roosevelt Avenue has an R6 equivalent, which is the same residential floor area that is currently permitted on this site. Map shows the site and the proposed zoning. As you can see, it's very close to Roosevelt Avenue and the 7 train that's on the corner of 82nd and Roosevelt. The proposed development pursuant to the C45X zoning district would be a 13-story mixed-use development on the lot, which is about 23,428 square feet in area. You can see it's a bit irregularly shaped, which contributes to the massing that you'll see in the next slide. The total zoning floor area would be 140,373 square feet, or just under a 6 FAR. This is a rendering of the proposed development in context. You can see the 2-story commercial base, which is consistent with the 2 stories of commercial that is located along 82nd Street, and the residential component of the project set back from the street front. In the rear, you can see Elmhurst Hospital, which is, as I mentioned, 180 feet in height. Just going to go through the development quickly, starting at the subcellar level, which is for parking. The building will include 13 stories and also a cellar and subcellar. Parking will be located in the subcellar, 128 parking spaces. 48 of these are required for the non-income restricted housing units. 0 are required for commercial, but in feedback from the community, I felt that off-street parking is something that's considered very valuable. The adjacency to transit is also important, and many people will access the site using public transit, but the parking is being offered to reduce the burden on on-street parking in this neighborhood. It will be fully attended, open to the public, and served by 2 attended car elevators from the ground floor. The cellar area will be occupied by retail. That will be the space that's leased to the Target Express. It's about 22,000 square feet. It's not zoning floor area, but it's 22,000 square feet of retail floor area in the cellar. And the ground floor plan will be occupied by what's envisioned as smaller retail tenants, also by a 2,000 square foot community facility space, which is, we're searching currently for a tenant for a local community-based organization that can offer services to the community, and we're working with the council member and other stakeholders on identifying a tenant. The ground floor also has, in addition to the car elevators that access the parking, 2 loading berths, which will be a significant improvement over former operations at the site where all the loading was done on street, which is a condition on 82nd Street. If you visit the site, all these small retail tenants load their trucks on the street. So the 2 off-site loading berths, which can accommodate large trucks, will be an improvement to that condition. Second floor plan will also be occupied by retail, another approximately 20,000 square feet. So overall, it's about 65,000 square feet of retail space in the proposed development. This last slide shows the residential typical floor layouts and the unit distribution. It's 99,000 square feet of residential on floors 3 through 13. It's going to be approximately 120 units, and more than half, 55%, are proposed to be 2- and 3-bedroom units, with actually 15% 3 bedrooms, 18 3-bedroom units, which is recognition of the need for larger units in the neighborhood. I'll turn it over now to Seth to briefly discuss the parking and loading.
You'll have 3 minutes, Mr. Martin. Your colleague has taken the 10.
You could just ask me questions. You can go right to questions.
Sorry, let me just go back to the site plan.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so Seth Wright from Philip Eve and Associates, talking about the traffic and parking and loading situation. So Baxter Avenue has a 40-foot wide roadway with parking on both sides, leaving 24 to 25 feet of driveway with the parking on both sides. So that's 2 full lanes going through. So this is one-way northbound, going east to your page. The two loading docks are on the furthest east side, and then the parking garage is adjacent to that. So right now you come through with the 2 lanes, and there shouldn't be any issue with that because it's between 200 and 500 cars per hour in the AM peak and the PM peak at the 500. And so with this type of roadway, that's typical for, if it was 1 lane, but because there are 2, it allows for vehicles to pass, it allows for vehicles to stop, if any do. So that 25 feet, 24 to 25 feet, allows for vehicles to pass along Baxter. The parking has been, the elevators have been set in further than was shown there, based on a comment from DOB about queuing. So there's a lot more queuing now. So vehicles that come in can queue inside the building. And that was a DOB change. Now you can hit me up.
Questions?
Yeah, sure.
Questions for Mr. Wright? Commissioner Efron.
Will this be a commercial parking area where parkers are charged?
Unknown, but probably it's going to be done by an operator who would have monthly residents and then transient for the retail. I mean, most of the required parking in the as of right is for the retail, but it's likely that 3/4 would be used overnight by the residences of the area, and any other spaces that aren't used could be used by residents from outside the building. But we think that like 75 of the 125 will be used by the residents of the building.
So the reason I ask is because one of the descriptions you gave of why there was additional parking is because of the concern of the neighborhood about street parking and the, I'm extrapolating here, the idea that this retail would attract people and may reduce the amount of street parking that was available for the community. And if you take the idea that this is a regional development or regional retail, as you also stated, you would attract people driving. And how does that square with charging, which may actually result in more cars parking on the street?
So just to clarify, I mean, we don't have a parking operator selected, and I'm not sure what the plan will be. I think it depends on the demand from residents of the building and from the retail tenants on the final parking operator and the proposed prices for the parking. We expect to draw some people and vehicles coming for the retail component, but this neighborhood already draws a lot of people and cars. The idea was just to accommodate both residents, others in the neighborhood. It's not just to accommodate traffic generated by this development.
I don't have the exact wording, but you actually did say that it was to accommodate people who are coming for the retail. So I'm just trying to square.
Right. No, I'm just trying to explain it's not only for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would like a little bit more detail about that as we go forward.
We can provide that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner De La Ruz.
I just want to follow up on a comment that Nora, that you mentioned. So it sounds as though that a C43 was considered, but that because it doesn't trigger MIH, that was basically eliminated. Is that true?
Yes, I mean, that's part of, when you're looking at potentially rezoning a property, take a look at what's in the area, what's appropriate based on existing land use in the area. And the C43, while it does accomplish some of the goals here, which include being able to do 2 stories of retail underneath residential, which the current zoning does not permit. The residential component floor area is not increased at all, and there is no requirement to provide affordable housing. So it wasn't really appropriate to map the C43 here.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Ortiz.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
I have a few questions on a few different issues, so
we'll respond as
I guess to go off Commissioner Efron's questions around the parking. I'm a little confused about the parking. We heard actually during review session that there were 39 required spaces. You mentioned 48 just now. In any case, 128 are being provided, and there's an elevator. They're all accessible by elevator. And there was also mentioned that this Target is a small Target, convenience-oriented Target. So folks are likely walking for the kinds of things that they need and want, and no other retail in the area has parking, and they seem to be doing just fine. So I'm struck by how challenging it might be to use this parking for commercial uses if it's an elevator, and people are trying to get in and out. And so you end up having 128 spaces for 120 units at a TOD location. You mentioned it's 120 feet from the station, with affordable units, which themselves do not require parking. So could you speak to the rationale for that, and sort of what we would actually expect that parking to be used for?
Sure. So to clarify, 2 points first. One is, I think at the review session on Monday, the 39 parking space numbers was calculated based on a project with a 35% affordability component. So that was the number of parking spaces that would be required for 65% market rate units. Just to be conservative, we're counting just the MIH units right now. So there are actually more market rate for purposes of calculating parking. So that's where the 48 number comes from, which is 50% of spaces required for 50% of the market rate units, which would be 96 of the non-MIH units. We anticipate that affordability level will be higher, so there would be a lower parking requirement, but just for conservative purposes. And then, so yeah, we're 180 feet from the 7 train at 82nd, and do anticipate that a lot of this traffic will be foot traffic. The Target Express, that is their model to serve a more local community. But in building, we had to provide parking. It has to be at a subcellar level. So we're building the subcellar, we're building a whole subcellar, which can accommodate additional parking. I think it was seen as a benefit to have parking available, although we're not sure if all of it will be utilized. If it's not, then there will be less cars coming in and out, and less impact on the surrounding streets.
So we're working under the assumption, though, that the parking will be utilized, and so we end up having an entry and exit onto Baxter, which is a narrow roadway. And so this might be a question for you. I do have concerns about Baxter, knowing how challenging that intersection. This is an irregular lot. So we have trucks loading and unloading, backing in an awkward way. In order to back in, they're going to have to block some of Baxter the way the design is now. We have a 128-unit parking lot with folks coming in and out. I'm not sure what times during the day. We have a supermarket across the street that is loading on the street, as you mentioned, with large trucks, which you end up having to drive around. We have a stoplight and a bus stop right down the street, which often backs up traffic. So even though there are 2 lanes, we've got, as you go down Baxter, it's 40 feet in width, but you have a parking lane, you have a drive-through lane, you have a bus stop. And then we haven't talked about the hospital and the routes that ambulances take to get to whomever they need to get to the north. So they're traveling along Baxter. So I have a lot of concerns about the ability of this narrow street to accommodate everything you're trying to accommodate on it and ensure that public safety is taken into concern, given the Trauma 1 center that we have, which is half a block away. So could you speak to those issues?
Sure. I think one point to make, and all of these concerns have been voiced through the public process, and we've taken them to heart. That condition with the loading and unloading and commercial development on the site would be essentially the same in an as-of-right development scenario. The proposed rezoning and the development it facilitates doesn't really change that situation. In reviewing, as Seth said, in reviewing where to locate the curb cuts and the loading berths, they reviewed all the surrounding streets, and Baxter Avenue, for numerous reasons that he enumerated, was the most appropriate street to locate the loading berth and the parking entry. It is a narrow street. It's not a wide street as defined by zoning, but it is the widest street that surrounds the property. And it does have the unique characteristic that it is one way and has 2 lanes. So it has enough room for parking on both sides and still 2 lanes traveling northbound to accommodate the volume. And it is a relative, traffic counts were taken, it is a relatively low traffic volume street. And with concerns about Elmhurst Hospital, again, definitely understood. As it's one way, the ambulances are not coming, after responding to a 911 call, for example, are not traveling back to Elmhurst Hospital via Baxter because it's one way northbound. When they're leaving, when ambulances are being dispatched from Elmhurst Hospital, which a lot of ambulances that respond to Elmhurst are not coming from Elmhurst Hospital. They are originating elsewhere. Some are. But we believe that given the existing traffic conditions and the width and the 2 lanes, that those ambulances could be accommodated and that the proposed development would not further impact those conditions.
Will a representative from the hospital be here to speak to, some of these issues? I'd prefer to hear it from the operator.
I don't believe that anyone's here today, but we could reach out to them.
Okay. So the loading and loading was was one big issue. The other is, the amount of retail square footage. I was a little confused by the amount of the information received. In the borough president's recommendation, they mentioned that the applicant had indicated there would be 20,000 square feet. The application says 39,000 square feet. You just mentioned in your presentation 65,000 square feet. Could you speak to those discrepancies?
Sure. I'm not sure in the Queensborough President's recommendation, once it was issued, I did notice that. I think that was just a misstatement. The application notes 39,000 square feet of zoning floor area for the retail space, which is accurate. There's an additional 22,000 square feet of retail in the cellar, which is not counted as zoning square footage. The EAS considers all of that plus additional gross square footage in their total 70,000 plus gross square footage number for the retail. And that's the number that was used to evaluate all of the potential impacts of the project.
Okay. Could we hear from your transportation guy on the parking issues and the width of that street? I'd really like an expert sort of to weigh in on that.
Sure. Can we go to?
I mean, because you mentioned, I understand that under an as-of-right scenario, we may end up with a similar situation. It doesn't mean we want that situation. So I would really like to understand the degree to which a street like this can accommodate all the things we're talking about without impeding traffic flow and without impeding ambulances that are going by.
So does this have a little arrow thing?
I don't think there's a pointer.
So as you can see, the 2 elevators there, the original proposal was have the elevators close to the entrance, which didn't leave for a lot of reservoir space. The elevators have since DOB sort of mentioned that, they've been moved way back into the site where the green kind of goes up behind the stair. So now and we can send you that plan. Now there's a lot of reservoir for vehicles entering and exiting to access the elevator. So the attendant
How many spaces?
There should be 8, and we can send that to you. I think the area in front plus the 2 elevators is at least 8. But that was a DOB concern, and we've answered that. So they came to say the same thing. But so there should be no queuing on the street based on that change, and
And so that was a big change to this. The loading, actually, we did a turning analysis for the trucks. The trucks, based on the 24 feet and the extra parking lane that's there, the trucks in that angle don't need to back up into the other lane. So the second lane that is through, the trucks don't use that to back into that with that angle. If it was straight on, the turn would go across the whole thing. But with the angle like that, the trucks don't need to use the second lane. And we have that if you want to see that too. So those were two things that that were done to sort of like mitigate those issues.
And in your professional opinion, do you have concerns about the issues that were raised in terms of, I mean, have you been to the site? Have you?
I have not.
Okay. So it's a very challenging intersection in its current situation. There's rarely a moment when you're not backed up at that exact location, waiting for a light to change, with multiple buses stopped at a stop. I don't see a situation in which we're adding two, bays of trucks, 128 spot parking garage with, queuing in and out. And then we have loading across the street, on-street loading for a supermarket across the street. Just a reasonable person would look at that and recognize that that's a very challenging situation. I mean, I hear what you're saying on the as of right, but it's still something that we don't want to encourage.
Just to add quickly, I think a lot of these concerns, we can do the traffic studies and the volume counts, everything, but I think some of this can be addressed operationally in trying to determine the best times to have deliveries to the site so that they don't coincide with peak traffic on Baxter, and that's something that we will look into, and I think we'd like to respond more fully to all of these concerns, which are completely valid and we understand in writing subsequent to the hearing.
Mm-hmm. And I think the hospital needs to weigh in. I understand that they haven't, but it's very challenging to weigh in on this intelligently without understanding the impact on the hospital and their ability to meet the needs of their patients, and how are they going to connect to the north? This is the only connection to the north that makes the most sense when you're leaving the hospital, and it's already a very challenging situation. And as you mentioned, there's going to be 65,000 square feet of retail under your scenario here. I find it difficult to understand how we're going to accommodate everything.
Okay, we're happy to do that.
Commissioner Capelli. Yes, I share many of Commissioner Ortiz's concerns. In addition to emergency service vehicles, where do the buses travel along this route?
Well, the buses come up Hampton, and they turn right and go up 82nd.
Could you pull the site plan up?
Go there. So the buses come up Hampton and turn right to go up to Roosevelt that way. I don't think any buses go down Baxter, at least there's no route.
They do.
Okay.
They do. So buses go down 82nd Street, they go down Ithaca, and they turn left on Baxter.
I'd like to know how many buses go along this route and how often and what the routes are.
Okay.
We can provide that. Thank you.
Questions? Commissioner Levin?
Yes. Is anyone from your client, the developer, here to speak today? Are we going to hear from them about their development vision and their experience working in the neighborhood and so on?
Not today, but if you have specific questions.
So then I guess I would ask who your client is and whether they have developed comparable projects that might help us understand the way they approach things like this.
Well, the applicant here is entity AA304 TIC GLC. One of the partners is Haskell Elias from the Elias Group, who has done significant work in Jackson Heights and in Queens.
Okay.
I'd be happy to provide more information on similar projects undertaken by the development team.
That would be good. And so then related to that, I mean, I gather this is it's hard to understand whether this started out as a retail project with some residential on it or as a residential project with some retail attached. But the retail really does seem dominant here. And there's a large second floor space. Is there a vision for the kind of tenant that is sought for the second floor space?
Right now, there is no tenant for that space, but I can confirm what the vision is there. I mean, the ground floor is definitely intended to be smaller tenants.
Right.
The second floor,
And the
could be
subseller
more,
is Target.
wouldn't necessarily be retail. It could be more of an office type use, or even, technically, it could be community facility tenants also.
So everything is possible at this point. There's no particular plan for it. Okay, and then I guess I'd like to get back to land use stuff, which is really what your expertise is. And I just need, I'm struggling with the land use rationale for this scale at this location. You've spoken about that somewhat. We have a tension between the uses we want to accommodate, in this case, affordable housing, and the context of the area. We have to be frank that this building is twice the scale, twice the height of the buildings across Baxter, and significantly larger than a lot of the other buildings in the area. The borough president, I think, shares this concern in her recommendation that every effort be made to redistribute the bulk of the building to lessen the overall height. I guess I'd ask you to give me your best argument for why this is an appropriate land use designation. I mean, aside from the use, but the scale of the thing. Does it make sense? Why does it make sense at this location to have something this large?
Sure.
And then, is it possible to rearrange it as the borough president has asked you to consider?
Sure. I guess I'll answer your second question first. I think you can see here on the site plan is probably the best. The site is very irregularly shaped. It has multiple street frontages, and it sort of comes at the point of the block, sort of actually stands alone, almost like an island there with the small park in front of it. The geometry of the site and basically just the maximum efficient floor plates for residential in order to comply with light and air on a single loaded corridor sort of constrain the massing that you see here. It could be tweaked, but in order to lower it by a floor, you wouldn't be able to utilize all of the residential floor area. Okay. So that's the massing question. And regarding the scale of the project, it's taller than the building surrounding. You have dense residential development, generally 6 to 7 stories. If you look in context, I know Elmhurst Hospital is one site. It is multiple buildings. I mean, it's really a block. Mm-hmm. It's a complex. And when you're looking at the site, you're here on the corner. You have the multiple street frontages. And then you have Elmhurst Hospital, which is really, I think it's easiest to see here, very close. Yeah. I mean, it's basically just down the street from the site. So in context, the way the building has been massed, set back from the street, set back from surrounding residential development, we feel is appropriate here, given the surrounding context.
Okay.
Other questions? Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will next hear from speakers in favor of the project, starting with Panos Koutris, who will be followed by Sebastian Tertullian, I believe it is, who will be followed by Hannah Birnbaum.
Good morning. My name is Panos Koutris. I work as a doorman. I'm a member of SEIU Local 32BJ, and I'm also a Queens resident. I'm here on behalf of the residential members of Local 32BJ, over 30,000 people who clean, maintain, and provide concierge services at apartment buildings throughout this great city. Life in New York City can be hard for regular New Yorkers. As the cost of sustaining a decent life continues to rise, the hardworking men and women of this city are often asked to do more with less. For these reasons, we believe that the need for both affordable housing and good-paying jobs couldn't be more urgent. Let's do the morally and economically responsible thing and give New Yorkers a break. We are glad to inform you that Developers Equity Partners and Haskell Group have made a commitment to creating much-needed affordable housing and good jobs for building service employees in Jackson Heights, a goal that our union supports. That is why we're urging the board to allow this project to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, sir.
Good morning. My name is Sebastian. I am here on behalf of 32BJ. I want to publicly state my support for this project on behalf of the many 32BJ members who live in Queens. 32BJ has a strong relationship with this developer. They've been proactive about wanting to create both good jobs and affordable housing with units that meet the needs of working families in the neighborhoods that desperately need both. This project is a testament to how good jobs and affordable housing can work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hannah Birnbaum. I manage 32BJ's new work on new development. I think you've heard from folks already about why we support this project, but I'm just here to sort of reiterate that this is going to create good jobs and affordable housing in a community where thousands of our members live, and we strongly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. John Curto.
How's it going? As a local resident, I just believe this project will create affordable housing and jobs for the public.
Thank you. Any questions? Randy Pace. Randy Pace. Randy Pace? Not here? Okay. Jerome Narte? Or Marte? What do you say? Martin. Okay. Didn't spell it like that.
Yes, I'm a retired construction worker, local 731, and I'm much in favor of this because it puts people to work. And that's very important because we need more jobs in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marte. Questions? Thank you, sir. Frank Cash? Frank?
He's coming.
Okay.
My name's Frank Catch. I'm an active construction worker, 731. I'm in favor for the affordable housing. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Robert Kurtz.
Hello, thank you. I'm Robert Kurtz. I'm a laid-off construction worker, 731, and I'm looking forward to all the good jobs, all the new jobs that it's going to create. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, sir. Daniel Curto. Daniel Curto.
Coming.
Hi, how are you? I'm actually an active laborers local 1010 worker, and I think this would create a lot of jobs because the worst feeling is to be on a waiting list, throughout the year. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Okay, we will now go to those opposed to the project. We're starting with Karina Kaufman Gutierrez, who will be followed by Patricia Chow, who will be followed by Grace Chung.
Hello, good morning, commissioners. My name is Karina Kaufman Gutierrez. I'm an organizer with Queens Neighborhoods United, a community-based organization made up of members who live and work in Jackson Heights, Corona, and Elmhurst. And I'm also a master's candidate in urban social policy at Columbia University. The proposed development and rezoning at 4031 82nd Street does not fit within the immediate neighborhood context of 2 to 3 floor buildings with small businesses on the ground floor, and if approved, will exacerbate the sustainability struggles that our neighborhood's small businesses already face. Today, I would like to speak to you regarding the Commission's comments made during Monday's review session when you questioned the developer's allocation of retail space. Borough President Melinda Katz and Community Board 4 also questioned to what degree local businesses will be represented in the development, stressing the need for the developer to market the additional 20,000 square feet of commercial space to local businesses. However, neither these recommendations nor the promises of the developer have been memorialized in any legally binding document. In fact, the only legally binding lease that the developer has signed is with Target, which prohibits other small businesses, some of which do not even compete with Target, from occupying the commercial space: secondhand stores, groceries, laundromats, nail salons, and pharmacies. This discriminatory lease explicitly excludes the majority of immigrant-run small businesses that currently thrive in the area. Instead, the developers have stated on their website that they want to introduce well-known or corporate stores into the area. We have seen Haskell Group's work in the past on Austin Street and Forest Hills, where they own property and courted corporate chain stores, including the Gap and Ann Taylor Loft, transforming the area by driving out many stores, and particularly the mom-and-pop operations. With this history in mind, how can we expect a different scenario at 4031 82nd Street unless these conditions are explicitly required by your commission? QNU, Queens Neighborhoods United, has spoken with dozens of small business owners from the community through direct community outreach and envisioning sessions. I have with me letters from some of their leaders who have stressed concerns regarding this exclusionary lease in place at the development and the significant harm this development will occur upon their business, not only due to competition with the corporate stores, but also due to the increased rent and property taxes in the neighborhood and traffic concerns. Already, initiatives like DOT's Clear Curbs initiative have incurred losses close to 60% during the hours the Clear Curbs is in effect. The proposed site design will also create chaotic conditions for commercial deliveries, thus exacerbating local traffic issues on this particularly sensitive site, and create significant blockades for small businesses also receiving deliveries. CPC must seriously consider the displacement impacts of this spot rezoning on our small business community in the face of this proposed corporate expansion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. Questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
How is it that you all know about the details of the Target lease?
It's listed online through Acris and Lucats.
The
details,
lease?
yeah, the memorandum of lease is listed online.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. If you have anything in writing about Clear Curbs, that would be very handy. And also, is there a business improvement district or a...
There is. There's the 82nd Street Business Improvement District, which operates right along this area as well, mostly on the other side of Roosevelt. But there we've also seen a significant increase in corporate stores and displacement of small businesses.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Ortiz.
I think it would be helpful if the developer provided some information on the exclusionary clauses. I think, we have seen this become a challenge in the neighborhood, and particularly given the amount of retail square footage they're presuming here. I think the potential impact of exclusionary clauses could make a difference in terms of what is allowed and what isn't. So I'd like to understand what they have committed themselves to, because I think there are implications for the rest of the square footage that they're anticipating. So if the developer could provide that for us in addition, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Levin.
Well, I guess simply to ask that the bell rang, I think, when you were mid-thought. Were there other headlines in your testimony, other main topics? And if so, maybe you could provide give us a picture of the other issues and then provide longer written testimony that we can read after the hearing.
Absolutely. Thank you. I just wanted to mention as well that small businesses are a significant source of jobs in Elmhurst and Corona, or in Jackson Heights. In Elmhurst, 32% of jobs are in small businesses, and in Jackson Heights, 36%. So if we're eliminating opportunities for small businesses here, we're also eliminating opportunities for jobs in the neighborhood.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Patricia Chow.
Hello, good morning. My name is Patricia Chow, and I'm a resident of Jackson Heights and live 3 blocks from the site of the, proposed rezoning. Today, I would like to direct my remarks about the proposed rezoning to the shape and the density of the proposed rezoning, density of the building, and urge you to vote against the proposed rezoning. The project the applicants are proposing is an affront to the character of the neighborhoods immediately surrounding it. Directly across Roosevelt Avenue is the Jackson Heights Historic District, the proximity of which the applicants refer to in their environmental assessment statement and other listing materials as an amenity and attraction to potential commercial and residential tenants. As numerous people, including members of this commission, have pointed out, the buildings in the surrounding commercial district are primarily 2 to 3 story mixed-use buildings with commercial space owned by small and immigrant family-owned businesses on the ground floor and residential or office space on the 2nd and 3rd floors. During your January 29th review session, the commissioners addressed this specifically, speaking both to how 82nd Street is a tremendous example of a commercial district with wonderful historic context. The applicants have not at all addressed this concern, as you all spoke to earlier, regarding the design of the building in either the as-of-right or the proposed rezoning. In its environmental assessment statement, the applicants acknowledge that the development will significantly visually alter the pedestrian experience of the proposed development site, but still somehow conclude that the site would not alter the arrangement, appearance, or functionality of the proposed development site, such that the alteration would negatively affect the pedestrian's experience of the area. Whether via the 13-story proposed rezoning or the 10-story as-of-right building, it is immediately apparent to me that the project would crowd the sky and be visible from the 37th Avenue and 82nd Street corner, or deeper, towering over the historic district. You, as the commission, have already raised the fact that other buildings in the area that are considered high density, as this building would be, are only 6 to 7 stories tall. This building would double that height and only be 30-some feet shorter than Elmhurst Hospital nearby. In previous public hearings for the proposed rezonings, commissioners expressed concerns that apartments listed via lotteries will not be filled. Here, it is important to stress that in an area where median household income is roughly $44,000 and over 57% of the residents of Elmhurst, Corona, and Jackson Heights are foreign-born and may not have access to the documentation necessary to even successfully complete the process through to signing, the barriers to accessing the mere 20% of affordable housing the developers are proposing via the lottery are exceedingly high. When held against the fact that over 25% of the households are overcrowded in Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and Corona, double the rate for the city at large, it is outrageous that the developers be allowed to build this complex, either in the proposed scenario or in the totally market rate as of right they continue to threaten our community with. So unfortunately, I know that the as of right is not on trial here, but if I could finish with the statement.
Just finish it.
Thank you.
One sentence.
Yes, thank you. It's a statement from an urban planner who lives in the neighborhood who could not be here today. So what she has written is, the proposed spot rezoning lacks a justification beyond creating the profit for developers. It does not create a public benefit nor contribute to the health, morals, safety, or general welfare of the community.
Thank you, Ms. Chow.
Thank you.
And if you care to submit written statements, you can to the secretary.
Wonderful, thank you.
Questions for Ms. Chow? Commissioner Ortiz.
I think one of the great things about this community is we have so many urban planners and architects. It's a great community. But one of the issues I think here is that there is an as-of-right scenario, right? Which, as the developer rightly said, allows them to build, something that would not meet the affordable housing needs. Right. Would not have any restrictions on use. They could put whomever they put in there. There's no tool that we have to change that. I think, unfortunately, our hands are somewhat tied with respect to the concerns around gentrification or small business gentrification, because a developer has a right to, do what they do within the zoning framework as it is. Right. Given that, what could you see here that would address the concerns that are raised? That otherwise we have very little ability to make any changes. George.
Right. So one thing that I would like to also stress too is that if we have concerns for the proposed as of right contributing to congestion, not providing any actual affordable space, the proposed rezoning would only exacerbate the questions of congestion via traffic or in terms of density, residential density. So I think that's one thing. But in community visiting sessions, I'm also a member of Queens Neighborhoods United. We've held with community members, so we've done community visiting sessions with over 100 to 200 residents and engaged something like 1,000 different folks over the months that we've been organizing in the community. They have talked about and looked at the floor area ratio that is currently permitted on the site, which would allow for 4.8 floor to area ratio for a community space. And that has been something that we've heard over and over again from members of the community, that is what they would like.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Chow.
Thank you so much.
Grace Chung.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Grace Chung, and I'm a community development professional and Queens resident who is deeply concerned about the proposed spot rezoning at 4031 82nd Street. The applicants contend that this proposed spot rezoning would allow a contextual and transit-oriented development. This proposal is neither. If approved, the proposed 13-story development would be grossly out of context with the surrounding low-density neighborhood, where no building with the exception of Elmhurst Hospital exceeds 6 stories. And as you all know, a basic premise of transit-oriented development is that the project should reduce dependency on cars, not encouraging more to come into the neighborhood. This proposal does the opposite. The applicant's proposal, as we've long discussed, includes a cellar parking garage with 128 parking spots, more than double what is required according to the applicant's own EAS. And as we heard earlier from the applicant's attorney, this parking and development would draw folks from around the region. Oh, thank you. As the commissioners noted during your January land use review session, this project is bound by 3 narrow streets, 82nd Street, Ithaca Street, and Baxter Avenue. The applicant proposes pedestrian and commercial entrances along Baxter, as well as access to the parking garage and adjacent loading dock on Baxter. And it should be pointed out that even if the developer has a loading dock that is inset, that would still promote and encourage traffic as that will have to compete with the existing trucks in that community. Baxter Avenue is already a high-traffic street, which carries up to 25,000 cars daily, according to the latest DOT data. And furthermore, the EAS fails to mention that Baxter Avenue leads directly to Elmhurst Hospital, only 1 block away, which is the 8th busiest ER in the nation. And as the developer's transit expert failed to mention, buses do in fact run along this route. Just check the Q29 route. Considering these factors, it is evident that this proposed development would catalyze a storm of competing commercial deliveries, ambulances, garbage pickup, and new Target shoppers in the community. The applicant makes no attempt to address this traffic nightmare and instead dismisses community concerns, claiming that the project would generate no potentially significant adverse transportation impacts. The applicants rightly point out earlier that they could still build an out-of-context traffic-inducing project as of right. And they argue that we should accept an even larger project in exchange for some carrots. The largest being the potential for affordable units triggered by mandatory inclusionary zoning overlay. The applicant recently negotiated new affordability rates with Councilmember Moya without consultation from the community. Yet even under this scenario, only 24 units would match the local area median income.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. Questions? Commissioner Ortiz.
Oh, actually, go to Michelle. I was just going to say, if do you have another point to add?
Well, I would love to just address the question that you brought up earlier about what do we do in this case of the developers moving forward with their as-of-right scenario. And I think it's also important to realize in the same way that these developers are pointing to Elmhurst Hospital to say that this should allow them to build a higher building because of the high-rise hospital, we can be certain that as Jackson Heights and Elmhurst continue to grow, that other developers will be watching and looking at this development to see how this project in fact changes the character and the height, the acceptable heights for the neighborhood.
Commissioner De La Luz, did you have a question?
One, I was just going to say, nice to see Grace in this capacity. I guess the question I have, really, given the months of organizing that members of the coalition, Queens Neighborhood United, QNU, have done, you know, I don't know if you would say that would agree with the additional person that spoke, that what the community has really said that they want was really a community facility use on the site to maximize that FAR of 4.8. I guess the question I would ask, if that is the desire of the community, do we know whether or not that was discussed with the developer at all, and whether or not that would even be financially viable at this location?
I can't speak to, I don't believe that QNU has had direct conversation with the developers. All we know at this point is that the developer has been having closed-door conversations with the local council member.
Commissioner Efron.
I apologize, this is slightly outside of the scope of a land use question, but one of your colleagues earlier said that more than 30% of the jobs, the local jobs in Elmhurst and Jackson Heights were for these smaller retailers. But with Elmhurst Hospital there, I'm just trying to figure out how that's possible.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a copy of that report. It actually came out of ANHD's recent report on small businesses.
If it's convenient, I would like to see it. I'm not questioning the veracity of your claim. I was just trying to intellectualize it. And
fair question. Happy to provide the material.
Other questions?
No. Where did you get your traffic count data? Because we've heard other things.
From the Department of Transportation. I can also provide that as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Chung.
Thank you.
Letitia Ochoa. Letitia Ochoa.
Hi, good morning. My name is Leticia Ochoa. I am a member of Queens Neighborhood United. I live in East Elmhurst, but I do a lot of shopping and I also visit the hospital in Elmhurst. I'm here to present, I made 40 copies of everything. We have petitions. We have more than 200 petitions, signed petition. We also have online petition going on. We also have a letter of support from 8 organizations that are opposing this from a variety of Queens neighborhoods as well. I also have personal statements from people that couldn't make it to here. One of the statements actually is from a nurse from Elmhurst Hospital who opposes this. I know you were looking for someone. We also have small businesses statements as well. Like one of my previous colleagues said, that we have done a lot of envisioning. We also have done envisioning with the children, because as you may know, there's a PS 89 just 2 blocks away from this development. It's one of the most overcrowded schools in Jackson Heights. One of the parents came to the Melinda Katz meeting, and she also said that they have no gym. That's how overcrowded it is. They have no gym. There's a lot of buses, not just the Q29. There's also the Q33, the Q32, because the 74th Street bus terminal is right like a few blocks away from Roosevelt Avenue, so it's already congested as it is. There's also like truckloads on both sides of 82nd Street and Baxter, and also as well as the bus stops. So it's really complicated, and a lot of people of the community are opposing this development. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Capelli?
Was the question asked of the community if they would prefer the as-of-right scenario?
We actually wouldn't prefer that.
Because
when we did the envisioning, even for the children, they'd rather see pools, they'd rather see a park, a green space in there. Other people and parents said they wanted to see school, because like I said, we're really overcrowded in the area. They also wanted to see senior centers, you know, because there's a lot of elderly folks as well. They prefer seeing other stuff than a building or like, you know, a residential building that is like that we can't afford to live in there.
Right, but there was no focus, attention put on a choice between A and B.
No,
Okay.
there was, sorry, there was. Any other?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Ochoa? Thank you, and you can give your documents to the secretary.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can get this right. Diego Palaguachi?
Hello, how are you? My name is Diego Palaguachi. I'm a resident of Queens. We have been doing outreach. I'm also a member of Queens Neighborhood United. I've been talking to a lot of small businesses about this development. And just to answer your question, yes, we have been comparing A to B. And this is a twist. I have three statements, one my personal statement, but also two statements from small businesses. This is small businesses on 3757 82nd Street. Dear City Planning Commissioner, my name is Jose Ali, and I am a longtime small business owner on 82nd Street, Jackson Heights, Queens. Thank you for the opportunity to offer my opposition to the proposed 4031 82nd Street spot rezoning. The proposed rezoning application is dangerous, not only to my business, but to the surrounding neighborhood that have served as support for me for more than 30 years. The proposed complex, as of right now, is already a logistical nightmare but with the rezoning, it will be an unnecessary detriment to my business and the quality of my customers. Many of my customers take public transit, either visit my store in the way home or from work, or make a stop from 82nd Street before hopping back on the train to head home. The rezoning will add further strain on the already burdened train stop because it is essentially doubling the number of residential units allowed to be built. This will affect my customers' quality of life and therefore my business, as many will not stop by my store after our crowded and stressful train ride. The traffic on 82nd Street is already a problem due to the amount of businesses with truck deliveries, bus routes, pedestrian vehicles, hospital emergency vehicles, and FDNY vehicles. It takes approximately 15 minutes at peak hours for fire department to make it from 82nd Street to Northern Boulevard, 82nd Street, and Ithaca. The as-of-right development, which has a target list, will already overburden or narrow streets, but the added density of rezoning can potentially cause death if it's low FDNY or ambulance emergency vehicles. I know this because I spend almost 8 hours or more on 82nd Street every day. The development under proposed as-right plans will unnecessarily be out of context with the neighborhood commercial corridor, and it will dwarf over the neighborhood of small businesses. With the rezonings, this will exacerbate many of the already overburdened resources in the community. Please consider my testimony when voting for the rezoning. My business is already burdened by escalating rent. In the absence of the rent protections, I do not need another factor to drive a stake through my business. Additionally, I just want to make a personal comment for local 731, local 1010, and local 32BJ. While they make their money doing all this construction, many of the community members will be displaced, and also small businesses will lose a lot of jobs in there. And I just want to remind you that a lot of undocumented people live and work there, and they will not be able to have access to these jobs.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry, what was the amount of outreach that you did in asking the question of A versus B, and what was the response?
Yep. So we have been doing that since the announcement. I think it's almost a year already. We have been going on weekends, on nights. As you know, like I have a full-time job, but I have to do it because I am part of the community. I'm very concerned about this. I can say it's like, we do between 16 hours per week, sometimes even more. And we go for small businesses. We stop also that from the development and ask small businesses. And we ask them, do you know the development? Do you know what is the numbers of the proposed proposed residential housing? Do you know the market rate? Do you know the AMI? And we ask those questions, how you feel about those things. And sometimes people will be like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm not sure what's happening here. But afterwards, they will be like, I'm going to be displaced. And that's very clear-cut, evident answer.
Other questions? Thank you, sir. Jorge Cabanillas.
3 minutes away. Is there any way that he can go after the next person?
If he's here in 3 minutes, I'll recall him.
Okay, thank you.
Ekaterina Bezbaratko.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for hearing my testimony. My name is Ekaterina Bezbaratko, and I've lived in the neighborhood. Thank you. And I've lived in the neighborhood for about 5 years, including several years literally a block away from the proposed development, so I'm fairly familiar with the area. And I'm opposed to this rezoning for a variety of reasons. First of all, the developers are not asking for this rezoning simply because they want to give affordable housing to the area. They're asking for it because this also allows them to increase the number of units. And I'm concerned that the amount of new units, the market rate units that will be allowed by this, will have an impact on the residential rents in the rest of the neighborhood, as such developments often do. And that will be an oversized impact relative to the actual affordable housing. And of course, we've already heard about the potential logistical problems for the hospital and possibly for the bus and train stops. But I'd like to make a bigger picture point as well, in that I understand that the as of right solution or as of right situation is not an ideal, also not an ideal plan, but I am concerned that New York City's land use planning commissions and processes really see zoning as the way of planning, and zoning is not planning, and spot zoning really isn't planning. So in a way, even though the as of right situation is not good, accepting spot zoning as something that developers can simply go and do over and over again in the absence of more comprehensive plans, I think opens the floodgates for somewhat haphazard development where developers get to make these concessions, get certain concessions and give certain rewards in exchange for avoiding poor as of right scenarios. And I really hope that this kind of dramatic spot zoning will be rejected also on principle, so that it is not a precedent of this is how we develop this neighborhood, and really that there be a better emphasis on comprehensive plans that deal with real affordability, that consider other kinds of housing options like limited equity cooperatives. And I'm sure that with the talents of people working in land use planning in New York City, it's possible to do planning and not simply spot rezoning.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Bezbaratko? Commissioner Ortiz.
I guess we all appreciate the thoughtfulness of, the bigger picture question. Would agree that there's opportunity for improvement, but we're facing a decision on one site and one project, and should this proposal fail, the developer will have a right to develop according to the underlying zoning, and there's very little that we would be able to do about that. And I think, that's something that I wonder if in your discussions with other residents, if that's come up, that's the alternative here, and whether people are more comfortable with that alternative, as imperfect as it might be, versus the proposal that we have before us.
So I personally have not engaged in extensive conversations with other residents about these various options, but from general conversations about the kind of development we're seeing, I know that there's a lot of concern about developers going and asking, basically that the process is skewed towards developers simply asking for things that they would like and getting them by way of threatening this kind of as of right. And I know there's a lot of hostility and concern to the idea that the land use the planning and development process is dominated by developers proposing individual developments, and there's a lot of resentment about this way of managing the neighborhood as opposed to actually planning something out. So I think that is a fair question, and I would defer in some ways to this commission to think about that, because you have the experience, but also to please understand that it's not just about this one development. It's also about sending a message that individual developers can come in and piecemeal change a lot of the neighborhood and likely use each additional development becomes a precedent for something else. And sooner or later, much of the neighborhood gets redeveloped drastically, and there was never a comprehensive process. It just becomes sold off piecemeal, rezoned piecemeal.
Commissioner Capelli.
Yes, you certainly have given me a lot to think about here. One of my concerns from what you have said is that the beginning of your statement was that you were concerned about how the market rate aspect would affect the rents in the rest of the neighborhood. But if the developer goes to an as-of-right situation, you're not going to have an affordable housing component, and you're going to have all market rate housing. And so, you could be in a worse situation, and that's part of what I think we need to balance when looking at this.
If I may respond, my understanding of the purpose of asking for a spot rezoning like this is that it doesn't just allow affordable housing, which I think we all support. It also does increase the market rate, the number of market rate units quite drastically. So the question then becomes how, and I'm sure and I would be glad to look into if studies have been done on this, that the sheer quantity of market rate apartments would possibly offset, it's a question, would that offset, would it make a lot of the surrounding area unaffordable enough that it offsets the benefits of these affordable apartments? So, and I know that has been a question that's been raised in the city. How much do these developments contribute to affordability in the area as a whole?
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Catalina Cruz.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Catalina Cruz, and I live in the Elmhurst-Jackson Heights Corona community. This proposed development is a hazard to human life. It will endanger thousands of lives in our community by creating traffic chaos on roads and ambulances needed to access and use Elmhurst Hospital. This development will be located in one of the busiest areas of Elmhurst-Jackson Heights. 82nd Street and Baxter Avenue are the essential routes taken by the emergency vehicles that bring children, seniors, and our first responders into Elmhurst Hospital. Elmhurst Hospital, which is located only 1 block away, is the only hospital for miles in any direction. Emergency vehicles are already frequently stuck in traffic along Baxter Avenue and Roosevelt Avenue. Elmhurst is a level 1 trauma center. The only other one is in Jamaica, miles away, with staff especially trained to respond to any type of emergency, including biochemical accidents and hundreds of motor vehicles and pedestrian accidents that occur in the nearby highways and roadways along Long Island Expressway, Grand Central Parkway, and Queens Boulevard. They see about 1,200 trauma admissions per year. From 2009 to 2014, the visits to Elmhurst Emergency Department skyrocketed by almost 40%. And I know you were hoping to hear from someone by Elmhurst Hospital. I'm a community resident, I guess. This is the best we're gonna get today. This is bound to continue increasing because they actually are going a renovation to increase by 10,000 square feet their emergency unit. The development proposed also includes a 128-car garage and car elevators, and we don't know how long these car elevators are going to take coming up and down, and truck and loading and unloading docks, and are guaranteed to create even more traffic chaos on the small local streets and will greatly delay response times by EMS and jeopardize lives. The developer is choosing to build this car garage, even though this site is only steps away from a subway station. There's no precedent for building of this size, as we saw in the picture, in the area, and absolutely no need for this amount of parking at what should be a transit-oriented development. This is terrible planning, and I urge the City Planning Commission to reject it. Let's recognize that obtaining special permission for this development to avoid current zoning regulations requires significant community benefit at a minimum, and serious efforts towards mitigating and navigating the impact proposed to exposing our community. As we heard from the developers, they can't even tell what buses are going through our community, through our streets. It seems like they barely had any conversations with our community members. And our community has already expressed grave concern and clear opposition to this development. And at the public hearing, we saw that community board unanimously rejected this proposal, yet the plan is continuing to move forward. We urge the community, we urge the commission to vote no on this unprecedented spot rezoning. It isn't a question of option A or option B. They can very well go back to the drawing board and come back with something that doesn't endanger the lives of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Questions? Commissioner De La Luz, did you have a question?
I just want to say, I think she covered it well in her testimony.
Any other, Commissioner Ortiz?
Hi, good afternoon, I guess. So the alternative here, the as of right alternative, which could begin immediately, does not include affordable housing, would not include affordable housing, would have less commercial FAR, certainly, and as the developer noted, would have the same loading challenges, because that's likely where you would put a truck. I'm not saying I'm happy with that, but that's, that's the reality. Is that an alternative? That is the alternative. I mean, is that an alternative that folks are ready to accept? Should you succeed?
Just because it's the only alternative on the table now, it doesn't mean that it's the only alternative in the history or that they could come up with. They could very well go back to the drawing board. They want to come into our community. They want to benefit, which is to be able to build either as a right if they want to, or to increase the size. But they're not having the right conversations with our folks, with the community. We heard from people before me that the community is very concerned about the small businesses, about being driven out, and I'm very concerned about safety. And on a personal, I'm concerned about safety because this is the hospital where my husband, who's a police officer, will be taken if he gets hurt. So for me, it's a personal issue. And it's my opinion that, in the opinion of many of my neighbors, that they have yet to come up with another alternative. It isn't an A and B situation. They have the money, they have the time, they can go back to the drawing board and figure out another possibility that meets the safety needs of the community, that meets the housing needs of the community. And if they want to come into our neighborhood, they have to be good neighbors, and they have failed to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Ms. Cruz.
Thank you.
Jorge Cabanillas.
Yes. Hello, sorry I'm late. Thank you for having us today. My name is Jorge Cabanillas. I'm a lifelong resident of Jackson Heights, Queens. Thank you for the opportunity to offer my opposition to this project. I am also a member of Queens Neighborhood United, and we have been actively engaging in opposition of this ugly mammoth of a building that Mr. Husko is attempting to bring into our community because of the tremendous negative impact we see it will have on this dense, diverse, and largely immigrant neighborhood. If this rezoning is approved, not only will it surpass the House of Right construction by 3 more allowable floors, it will double the impact because it will almost double the amount of units the developer will be able to build, according to their EAS statement. This, in collaboration with the target, will exacerbate our surrounding infrastructure and resources. It will cause things like traffic congestion, train overcrowding, school overcrowding, and overall affect our quality of life while simultaneously raising our rents. On page 40 of the developer's EAS, they state, quote, "The proposed actions would not adversely alter the setting or visual context of any historic resources in the area." If you ask any small business owner and resident in the surrounding area, they will tell you otherwise. The south side of 82nd Street is not historically protected or designated as a historical district, but this is why they were able to destroy the 1920s movie theater that sat on that lot beforehand. But many naturally assume that it is an extension of the north side of Roosevelt due to the maintenance of low-rise commercial shops that are 2 to 3 stories max on the south side, even though it's not protected. This building is not contextual and contradictory to the neighborhood fabric. It would be a luxury high-rise with a mall at the bottom, dwarfing over small immigrant-owned small businesses. The developer's EIS also states that this high-rise will not only have the quote, potentially significant adverse transportation impacts based on the projected volume of pedestrian and vehicular trips to be generated. I think you can speak again to any resident and small business owner in the area, and they will tell you that traffic is already a problem and will be chaotic with this rezoning. 82nd Street is traversed by pedestrian vehicles, taxis, delivery trucks, ambulances, fire trucks. This will exacerbate traffic issues, not to mention to be potentially life-threatening due to its proximity to Elmhurst Hospital, which the mayor has stated is the 8th busiest hospital in the nation. The fact that they stated that it will not have any effect is totally ridiculous and intentionally deceiving, as they have property with a Target in Forest Hills and a Target across the street and one of their locations in Manhattan. So they should be very well aware of this. In all, we would like them not to bring a smaller business killer like Target, but I know this is about zoning and not planning for sustainability. But as the City Planning Commission, I urge you to think about the people who are not standing here today, because unlike Mr. Haskell, and this is his business, right? We have all taken time from our day here. We've privileged enough to get out of work to come here today. I'm here on my lunch break. There's many people who are not here, and this is a very exclusionary meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you. Nuaka O'Doherty.
Sorry, I'm height challenged. Good afternoon. My name is Nuala O'Doherty. I'm the president of the Jackson Heights Beautification Group. It's a civic organization that's been around for 30 years, and we were the ones who pushed for the historic district that's just north of Roosevelt Avenue here. And because of that historic district, we have a lot of old, beautiful architecture that is either 1 or 2 family homes or up to 6-story apartment buildings. So this is going to be a change. Now, they can, as of right, make change, and we're not opposed to change. But what I think the commission should consider is that the developer is coming to you asking for this favor, all right, and asking our community for the favor to build bigger. That's their right. They can come here. What we as a community are asking for is what we get back, all right? And we have some very specific things we want back. We want back the safety of our neighborhood, all right? If I have a heart attack, that ambulance has to get to Elmhurst Hospital. And I've been really impressed. This is my first time being at a planning meeting. I've been very impressed with your knowledge of this and your insightful questions. And the other thing that really surprises me is that the developer's not here. And I think that shows you what kind of neighbor they're going to be, and the lack of the fact that they haven't been speaking to us. Instead of having closed-door meetings with our assembly, our representatives. So they want to build bigger, and what we need are some very basic things. One, safety. Anyone who's been in the neighborhood knows about the gridlock. The mayor knows about the gridlock. The mayor last month implemented something called clear curbs along Roosevelt Avenue there. All the way from 90th Street to 74th Street, no cars are allowed park on either side of the street from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 7 p.m., really hurting our local businesses. But they did that because of the constant gridlock right in this neighborhood. Now, I know the representatives for the developers said the ambulances don't go that way, go north on Baxter it's usually when they're returning from the hospital, not going to the hospital when they have an emergent situation. But what you need to understand, I think some of you have been to this neighborhood and know, it is a gridlock situation. It is so bad that the traffic backs up in every direction at all times of the day and night. If you add in there a Target, right, which is going to bring people in with parking spaces, 128 parking spaces with 2 elevators. All right, if you've ever gone to a parking situation with these 2 elevators, it takes a long time for each car to go down to the sub-basement and then back up. So that means that there's going to be this backlog back on Baxter, which is going to hurt our community's safety, and that we want something back if they're going to get something bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Doherty. What is your view, Ms. O'Doherty, of the as-of-right option here, which, as my colleagues have said, could be built without?
Right. We don't like the as-of-right, obviously. They have the right, and development happens. We understand that. But since they're asking for this benefit, they're asking to build bigger, and it will be out of context, the bigger thing. If they're going to do that, I think as a community, we have to ask for them to make these changes that will make this work in our neighborhood. And I think the most important thing we want to ask for is a better neighbor, which are not being, 1, by not showing up here today to talk to you, and 2, by not talking to us, not even talking to the hospital, the huge hospital that's next door. That's one of the most important things in the entire north of Queens. I think the fact that they're bad neighbors show that this is not going to work. And if they want a favor from this commission, they should be working with us, and they're not.
Thank you. Other questions from Ms. O'Doherty? Thank you. Unless there is another individual whose name is Jorge Cabanillas who is here. I thought so.
They called you out.
We'll go to those in favor, starting with Thomas Gretsch, followed by Louis Nicolosi, followed by Bishop Sheldon Ferguson. Thomas Gretsch.
Thomas Gretsch got into a car accident, Mr. Knuckles. How's everybody doing today? And so I have a letter for him.
And you also?
I'm Bishop Mitchell Taylor.
Okay.
He asked
Bishop, if you would just abide with me.
Okay.
Use the term for 1 second. Is Luis Nicolosi here? Not here? Okay, Bishop.
I'm just reading this on behalf of Thomas Gretsch, who was in the car accident. Dear Chair, I write this letter on behalf of Queens Chamber of Commerce in support of the above referenced land use application, which seeks 1, a zoning map change from R6 C13 zoning districts to C4 5X zoning district, and 2, a zoning text amendment to designated mandatory inclusionary housing MIH areas with the rezoning area. I understand that the proposed rezoning and MIH designation will facilitate development of the subject site with a 13-story mixed-use building with cellar and 2 stories of commercial, retail, and community facility uses, and approximately 120 residential units, approximately 25 or 30 of which will be permanently affordable for low-income New Yorkers pursuant the MIH program. The Queens Chamber is the oldest and largest business association in Queens. We've achieved a membership level of near 1,000 organizations representing over 90,000 Queens-based employees. The proposed development that would facilitate The rezoning would provide over 200 retail jobs to our Queens community. We look forward to working with the applicant to assist in their local hiring efforts. Furthermore, we do not believe that the proposed development would displace existing commercial businesses in the area. This part of Jackson Heights, Elmhurst, Roosevelt Avenue, and 82nd Street has historically been a commercial hub, and we believe that the wonderful variety of commercial establishments located in the area, which range from small ethnic groceries to family-owned shops to larger chain stores, will continue to be valuable in serving the needs of the local community. Respectfully, Thomas J. Gretsch.
Do you have anything to add, sir? You have more allotted time.
No, I'm just reading, I'm using his time.
Okay.
All right.
Well, we hope that he is not seriously injured, if injured at all, in this
Yeah, no, he wasn't injured, but his car was injured and his heart and his feelings were hurt greatly.
Better those than his physical body. Thank you, Bishop. Question? Questions?
Mr. Taylor, if you could just maybe ask for a follow-up, and I hope that Mr. Gretsch is as well, and it sounds like he is despite the accident. You know, especially since that was a letter from the Queens Chamber of Commerce, and because we've heard from residents and business owners about their concern about the displacement, it would be helpful to know if the chamber actually did any outreach to the local businesses in the area and did any surveying of businesses to determine what their concerns were directly. So if you wouldn't mind just communicating that and asking if there's any information that they have from direct outreach to local businesses, if they could follow up.
I certainly will. Thank you.
Other questions for Bishop Ferguson?
No, I'm Bishop Taylor.
Yes.
Bishop Ferguson is in the audience.
I'm sorry, thank you.
Bishop Taylor, if you could also inquire of the Queen's Chamber whether Elmhurst Hospital is part of their association and if they might have anything to share with us about their opinion.
Okay.
Other questions for Bishop Taylor? Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Bishop Sheldon Ferguson.
And good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. To the commissioners, I'm writing this letter on behalf of the Mount Olivet Gospel Church of Corona, Queens, in support of the above referenced rezoning, which seeks to change from R6-61-3 zoning district to a C4 5X zoning district. And we're asking also, and we are in support of the mandatory inclusionary housing area. I understand that this proposed development facilitated by this zoning will contain approximately 120 units, 25% approximately for 30, which will be permanently affordable for the low-income New Yorkers. Furthermore, the proposed retail stores will result in over 200 jobs that will be available to the local community. Lastly, the proposed development will contain community facility space intended to be occupied by a nonprofit business incubator offering business support services, education, training to the aspiring entrepreneurs. Our congregation lives, works, and shops in this area, which this rezoning is proposed, and will benefit from the affordable housing, local jobs, and services that will be provided by this proposed development.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Bishop Ferguson, thanks for being here. I think you're the first person to mention the nonprofit business incubator, so to the extent that that's something that the developer could share more information about, that would be helpful. It's the first time we hear about it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Ephraim.
Thank you for coming, and I know that you were here earlier, so I'm sure you were listening as we were to the testimony of many of the community residents who are concerned that even with the affordable housing, that the effects of rent increases because of more market rate housing in the neighborhood might actually in their opinion, harm the affordability for others already living in the community. And I'm just wondering if you have a point of view on that.
Well, I'm not 100% sure actually what's going to be happening and what's going to be going on with that. To my understanding, if that does raise the rents, this is something that needs to be talked about. What I would like to do and what I would like to also propose to those that are opposed of it, if we could just get together. I've heard of meetings that were met and individuals talked and they came together. We weren't, or myself, were not included in these meetings. I believe everyone here wants the best for their community and for the people. So if it's any way possible, if I could meet with some of the individuals here that are opposed, and let's just simply come together. We want the best, everyone wants the same thing, which is for the community. So I'm making myself available. This is my first time in any kind of a planning meeting like this. I don't have all of the facts. I don't know all of the answers. But if we could just simply come together for the benefit of the community, I think we all would be a better people for it.
Thank you for your response.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Reverend Patrick Young.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and appreciate you affording me this opportunity to share in my support to this, because I have one of the largest churches in West Queens and First Baptist Church of East Elmhurst, and we are very supportive because particularly as it deals with permanent very low income housing that will help deal with congregants who are living in that community. And also opportunity to open up doors to have ranging income rents for $524 for studio and $929 for 3-bedroom. It would create an opportunity for real, very low affordable housing, which our congregants and our community richly needed. And we are in support of this wonderful project. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Reverend Young? Thank you, sir. Reverend Gilbert Pickett.
Good afternoon. Reverend Pickett couldn't be here today, and I'm reading a letter on behalf of him and my church.
Ma'am, would you identify yourself?
My name is Reverend Darlene Morgan.
Oh, okay.
Dear Chair and Commissions, I am here to present this testimony on behalf of the Mount Horeb Baptist Church in Corona in favor of the 82nd Street rezoning. I have been informed that the proposed development facilitated by this rezoning will contain 120 units, 20% or 24 of which will be permanently affordable for very low income households at 40% AMI and 15% or 18 of which will be affordable to households of 50%, 60%, and 80% AMI levels. Furthermore, the proposed retail uses in the development could generate approximately 200 jobs that will be available to the local community. Lastly, the proposed development will contain a community facility space intended to be occupied by a nonprofit business incubator offering business support services, education, and training to aspiring local entrepreneurs. Our congregation lives, works, and shops in the area and where this rezoning is proposed, and will benefit from the affordable housing, local jobs, and services that will be provided by the proposed development. We ask that the proposed rezoning be approved by the Commission. Respectively, Reverend Gilbert Pickett, Senior Pastor.
Thank you, Reverend Morgan. Questions? Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the request that Commissioner Delauze made of the development team, if they could provide us information about this business incubator idea, because we've heard about it now from a number of the religious organizations, and we haven't heard about it from you. So if you could fill us in, that would be good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this item?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Bishop Taylor,
Yes, sir.
I know you've spoken before us before, but we only permit one speaker per hearing. One speaker per hearing. So you spoke before. I know it was on behalf of Mr. Gretsch, but we can't permit you to speak again on this matter. But you can submit written testimony, absolutely. Which is why I asked you if, when you had the remaining time, did you care to speak?
Oh, I wasn't clear that if I read a letter from Mr. Gretsch, who had an unfortunate accident, that it would preclude my time. So I would ask that maybe there be a consideration, maybe I can have half the time that you would give someone.
You can submit a written statement, sir, and it will be read. I assure you.
Can I also address maybe the question about the incubator?
Yeah, we need to hear from the developer on that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your time, sir. Okay. If there are no other speakers on this item, the hearing is closed.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 23 and 24. Calendar number 23, CD6, C180025, ZSM. Calendar number 24, C180026. ZSM, a public hearing in the matter of applications for the grant of special permits concerning Kips Bay Towers parking facility.
Okay, the first speaker on this item in favor will be Robert Jacobs.
Thank you.
Might that be you, sir?
That's correct, Vice Chair Knuckles. Good afternoon to Vice Chair Knuckles and the commissioners. My name is Robert Jacobs, and I'm here today on behalf of Kips Bay Towers Condominium. Thank you. What happened? Well, the PowerPoint is...
We need some TA here.
Just do the arrow.
Well, there goes half a minute. Anyway.
No, I reset it.
I'm here on an application for 2 special permits to increase parking in 2 self-parking outdoor parking lots. At the outset, I'd like to say we have received the support of Councilwoman Carlina Rivera and Borough President Gail Brewer in a very well-reasoned resolution. Kips Bay Towers consist of 2 towers on 7.54 acres with 1,120 residential units and approximately 4,000 residents. Each tower is serviced by an off-street parking lot with a legal capacity of 50 cars for a total of 100. Based on a misunderstanding of a 1998 resolution of CB6 not opposing additional parking spots in a BSA application that was not finished, prior management caused the lots to be striped for 136 cars. At present, 123 of the spots are rented, which is 23 more than permitted. The application seeks to legalize the 23 rented spots and add 14 more spots for a total of 135 spots. There is a below-ground parking lot, which is not the subject of this application, operated by a garage operator not affiliated with the condominium under a lease that expires 2058. The applications have met the conditions and findings of the Manhattan Core parking regulations. There's no conflict with vehicular pedestrian movement, no conflict with bike or other special uses, and the requested number of spots is reasonable and not excessive in the study area, which is a 1/3 mile radius with a 10-year look-back period. The parking change, including the requested spots, will be 280 spots. The unit change is 1,694, which is 16.2%, which is less than the 20% ceiling permitted under special permits. The parking lots are to be substantially improved for the benefit of the residents. They'll contain 4 handicap spots each. They'll have 8 bicycle racks with 16 more planned to be installed. Additional striping will be added for 55-foot wide pedestrian crosswalks. Speed bumps and stop signs will be added. There is a significant elderly population at Kips Bay Towers. It's very unusual. It's a multi-generational complex who utilize this parking, with most being senior citizens. In fact, 90% of the parking tenants are senior citizens, 45 of which are rent stabilized. The parking lots are far less expensive than the off-street garages in the vicinity. They're more accessible for the users, and there's a waiting list of 250 residents. 90% are over the age of 15, with many being senior citizens. Increasing the number of parking spaces will decrease demand for street parking. I have a copy of the diagrams of the proposed parking facilities, if anyone has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Is there a fee to park?
Yes.
Here?
The residents are charged a fee which is below market, and the rent stabilized tenants are charged a fee that's even below that, maybe half the fee of the residents.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Mr. James, thanks for being here. I appreciate also the history of what happened and how, for whatever reason, it didn't get quite followed all the way through. If I recall correctly, the community board had a number of requests that related to being able to pass through the site, and I know there was one other. Unfortunately, my computer just died, so I can't see the recommendations.
They wanted the park opened up and the fencing taken down.
Was that at one point available to the larger community?
In the early 1980s, this prior to it being converted to condominium, there was public access.
I see.
When it went condominium, it was closed for security reasons. There are 4,000 residents there, and we have to take care of them. As for the easement claimed by the community board, there is in fact no easement of record, as noted by Borough President Brewer in her resolution. I think Kiss Bay has otherwise been a good neighbor. It's a very green and sustainable environment, with solar panels, recycling, and many things for the benefit of the community. The parking is well screened and not visible. The increase would be not visible to the community. Any further questions?
Commissioner Capelli.
How did you come up with the number of handicap parking spots?
It's required under the statute.
So it's the minimum required?
I think it's three and change. So we went to 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, commissioners.
Vladimir Fabalukas.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I only echo Mr. Jacobs' statement. I signed up in case there were questions that my expertise would need.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
What is your expertise?
Like the rent stabilized tenants and generally parking. So
it's a good question.
If there were any questions.
Commissioner, I have one.
Sure.
Because I think, what is the history of the rent stabilized tenants receiving a reduction in the parking? Is that part of an agreement in the past? Are you aware of that?
Not a reduction. It's that the increases to the parking rates that the rent stabilized tenants have incurred are capped at the rent guidelines board levels. So their parking increases have not gone up as.
I understand. Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Tara Duvivier.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Tara DeVivier, Urban Planner, on behalf of Manhattan Borough President Gail A. Brewer, to speak in support of the special permits to allow for additional parking spaces and to legalize existing parking spaces in the north and south parking lots at Kips Bay Towers. Kips Bay Towers is a development that has existed for over 60 years and houses thousands of community residents. It has great architectural significance and is a large part of the community. While this office does not approve of the 23 spaces currently operating illegally, the Department of Buildings has been notified and issued violations for these spaces. There is a significant and elderly population at Kips Bay Towers who utilizes the on-site parking. It is more accessible and allows them to enter their homes more easily than using off-site garages or street parking. According to the applicant, 100% of the spaces in the north and south parking lots are currently rented by residents aged 50 or older. Despite the fact that the current legal number of parking spots in this development provides parking for nearly half of its residents, there is still a waiting list of nearly 250 residents at Kips Bay Towers for on-site parking. It is clear that there is a need for additional on-site parking. These residents on the waiting list who do have cars are either parking in alternate garages nearby or are utilizing street parking, which is not in large supply given the area. Allowing Kips Bay Tower to increase their number of parking spaces will hopefully reduce the demand for street parking as more residents will be able to park on site. In addition, the proposed actions would allow for the addition of a total of 8 ADA accessible parking spaces as well as additional bike parking.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Are there any other speakers on this item? If there is none, then the hearing is closed.
Okay. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 25 and 26. Calendar number 25, CD6, C170380ZMM. Calendar number 26, N170381ZRM. A public hearing in the matter of applications for zoning map and zoning text amendments concerning East 33rd Street rezoning.
Okay, again, we will have the applicant team speak for 10 minutes, which will be followed by speakers in opposition, and then again, speakers in favor. Our first speaker from the applicant team is Dan Eggers.
Go ahead.
Sure. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Knuckles and Commissioners. Dan Eggers again, attorney representing 33rd Street Acquisition LLC for an application to rezone a portion of the north side of East 33rd Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues from an R8A to a C19A district. The rezoning would be subject to mandatory inclusionary housing and would facilitate the provision of up to 40 affordable housing units in a 23-story, approximately 123,000 square foot building with ground floor retail and residential above. Our client owns the property at 339 to 343 East 33rd Street. That's lots 24, 25, and 26, and is the prospective owner of 345 East 33rd Street. That's lot 27. He also intends to purchase about 16,000 square feet of development rights from lot 23. The 4 buildings on the property our client owns or may own contain a total of 40 dwelling units, of which 10 are subject to rent regulation. These 40 units would in effect be replicated as permanently affordable housing units under mandatory inclusionary housing, as 40 affordable housing units would be provided. The proposed rezoning would extend the existing C19A district along the blocks 34th Street and 1st Avenue frontages an additional 200 feet into the mid-block to encompass the 4 development site lots, the development rights parcel, and 3 out-parcel lots to the west, lots 20, 21, and 22, and a portion of lot 28. Here are conceptual renderings. One on the left shows the building on all 4 lots, and the one on the right shows the building just on the 3 lots that our client currently owns. There would be 117,000 square feet of residential floor area, which would be subject to mandatory inclusionary housing. Our client is proposing to comply with MIH Option 1, which would require that 25% of the residential floor area be affordable to households with incomes averaging no more than 60% of area median income. There would be approximately 155 dwelling units, so 25% would equal about 39 units. Our client intends to seek 421A tax benefits, and since there are currently 40 dwelling units, the building must contain 40 affordable housing units per the required replacement ratio. We believe there's a sound land use rationale for the rezoning. First, the 23-story height of the building would be in context. There are several other buildings in the surrounding area that are at least 23 stories. It wouldn't even be the tallest building on the block, as there's a 36-story building on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 34th Street. Second, the proposed C19A district would match the existing C19A district adjoining the site and encompassing most of the remainder of the block, including the mid-block fronting East 34th Street and the block's First Avenue frontage. While C19 and C19A districts are usually mapped along avenues and not mid-blocks, we believe this is a unique mid-block condition where extending the C19A district into the mid-block is justified. One reason is because East 33rd Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues is a wide street as defined by the zoning resolution. At 80 feet wide, it's actually wider than Lexington Avenue, which is 75 feet wide. The blocks fronting Lexington between East 33rd and 34th Streets are zoned C19, permitting the same maximum FAR as the proposed C19A district, but have no height limit, while the proposed C19A district would have a maximum building height of 230 feet. No other portion of East 33rd Street is this wide. In sum, the proposed rezoning to a C19A 12 FAR district would allow the development of a new mixed-use building that would address demand for housing at varying income levels by providing 40 affordable housing units and local retail space in the community. Now to address questions from review session on Monday. Commissioner Levin asked that we discuss the tenants in the 3 applicant-owned buildings. There are 23 units in these 3 buildings. When our client purchased the buildings in late 2015 and early 2016, there were 12 market rate, 8 rent stabilized, and 3 rent controlled units. The buildings were delivered with the market rate units vacant. Soon afterwards, our client sent a letter to each tenant to begin talks about arranging a buyout. This letter informed the tenants of their rights, advised that they could get counsel, and disclosed that he plans to build a new building on the site. Copies of the letter were sent to local elected officials, including former council member Mendez. He wanted to be as open and transparent as possible. So there were 11 rent-regulated units. Since then, 2 tenants have vacated due to buyout agreements. Both were represented by counsel. A 3rd tenant, who is rent-controlled and is represented by experienced counsel, was bought out via a Florida relocation deal, which is not yet completed. Now there are 8 tenants with 7 rent stabilized and 1 rent controlled, which my client has not reached an agreement with yet. His goal is to reach an agreement with each of them. As you know, these negotiations take time, and the law prevents him from contacting a tenant more than once in 180 days if they don't respond. It is also possible that these 8 tenants could be relocated back into the new building. These would be in addition to the MIH required affordable units. So far, none of the tenants have asked to be moved back into the building, but my client is certainly open to discussing. The rents would be negotiated below market rents. Of these 8 tenants, according to our client's landlord-tenant council, who had an unavoidable conflict arise on Monday and unfortunately couldn't be here today, we are aware that 3 are represented by counsel. One of these tenants is himself a Manhattan attorney who is represented by a prominent tenants council. There are 2 tenants mentioned in the borough president's recommendation that I want to speak to briefly. The first claimed to have had no heat and to have been unjustifiably sued by the owner multiple times. My client's counsel disputes these allegations and can document such. She states this tenant has never once paid rent unless ordered to by a court. This tenant has been sued by the applicant 3 times for non-payment of rent and received only a slight abatement, and has been represented by 6 different private attorneys, according to her. This tenant has openly admitted to the applicant and his landlord and tenant council that she believes that by forcing the landlord to sue her for rent, that she will stimulate a $1 million buyout offer. The second claimed to have had difficulty obtaining their lease renewal and a countersigned copy. My client's counsel has advised that this tenant, who is represented by the chairman of the real estate group of an international law firm, was trying to negotiate a lower than legal rent. He filed an overcharge complaint with DHCR, which was denied. His lease was renewed, and his tenancy is properly registered with DHCR. In fact, all tenants are properly leased up and registered with DHCR. There is no tenants association that we're aware of, and there has been no finding of harassment in the time that the applicant has owned the buildings. Commissioner Levin also asked about the status of purchasing Lot 27. It's a lot directly to the east of the 3 buildings that my client owns. The building on Lot 27 is owned separately from a fee above a plane that was created above it in the 1980s. which complicates the transaction. Our client has been in talks with the building owner and the fee above the plane owner to acquire both pieces. However, it is possible that just the fee above a plane may be purchased, in which case the new building could cantilever over the existing Lot 27 building. But I would point out that in any case, this rezoning should not be dependent on the purchase of Lot 27. Even without Lot 27, my client's 3 parcels would have 65 feet of frontage and would contain, the development would contain approximately 30 affordable housing units. That's a substantial development. The land use rationale discussed previously for extending the C19A district, which would exist independently of the purchase and redevelopment of Lot 27. As you know, areas are often rezoned that include properties for which no immediate development is planned, but is considered appropriate for future development from a land use rationale. I ask for your favorable consideration and welcome any questions.
Okay. Do you wish to have any other member of your team speak, or you want to?
Well, they're here in case there are questions that you ask me that I can answer.
Questions? Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. I heard your argument about 33rd Street being wider than Lexington Avenue. Not sure exactly why it's relevant here, but nonetheless, 33rd Street is a side street. It is not a two-way side street the way 34th Street is, where the zoning exists, and it's not an avenue. Give us some reason why there should be an exception in a mid-block on a side street.
Well, actually, there's a proposal that the community board recently took up, and I believe it's in the process of being enacted to, in fact, make East 33rd Street on that block frontage a two-way street.
But it's not.
Not currently, no.
Okay.
No. So the rezoning in 1995 that mapped an R8A district, where the site is in place of the previous R8 district. And I'll read you a highlighted section from the report. It was done with the purpose of making sure, and I'm quoting, to preserve neighborhood character by ensuring that the bulk form of all future buildings is consistent with the predominant built form. And as discussed, there are 23-story buildings in the immediate vicinity of this site. There's a 23-story building on the corner of 1st and 34th, on the corner of 1st and 33rd Street, and there are 2 21-story towers directly to the south. So this would be in context, and that was one of the objectives of that rezoning.
May I challenge that for a second? The ones on this block are on corners, and the context of the immediate area is 4-story buildings.
The mid-block on 34th Street is in a C19A district, and while currently those are lower-rise buildings, they could be developed with up to 23-story buildings in the future. So I think that there's been a determination that this block, even in the mid-block on 34th Street, which is a wide street, just the same way East 33rd Street is appropriate for greater density and height.
I don't mean to debate with you, but 34th Street is a two-way street, and you've already said that 33rd Street isn't a two-way street.
It's being made into it, right? It's being made into one.
Oh, so the community board has recommended it. Has DOT taken it up?
Yes, I just don't believe it's been enacted as of yet.
Okay. Anything you could provide that shows that it is in fact going to be would be helpful.
Yes,
thank you.
Will do.
Other questions? Commissioner De La Hoz.
Mr. Gertz, thanks for providing the detail about the current rent stabilized and rent controlled tenants. Do you happen to know of the 8 remaining tenants that are stabilized and controlled, what their current rents are?
Yes, I have that information. So the average rent of the rent stabilized units is $1,390 per month. These are approximately 350 square foot studios. The rent controlled units rent is $912 a month. It's an approximately 550 square foot 1 bedroom. Now, under MIH, of course, the rents are set by HPD. So at the 60% AMI level, these studios would be $761 a month, and they would be larger. In fact, they would be 54% larger than the current studios, but they would be rented for approximately 45% less. As I said, $761 a month as opposed to $1,390 a month. So there'd actually be a greater level of affordability under the proposal than currently exists.
And if I may, so what would be the unit breakdown for the MIH units in the future?
So the MIH units would be 50%, 25%, 25%. That's what HPD generally requires.
Meaning studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms? Yes. And you said now that those that the developer is open to discussions with the current tenants for relocation and bringing them back into what would, I guess, be the market rate apartments at reduced rents.
That's correct.
What is the anticipated market rate rents on the new apartments?
So the anticipated market rate rents would, studios would be averaging $3,200 a month. One bedrooms, $3,900, and two bedrooms, $4,900 a month. And just to clarify about the 50, 25, 25, be 50% two bedrooms, 25% one bedroom, 25% studios. So you know HPD favors larger units. Just want to make that clear.
Okay, so although I appreciate the willingness of the developer to enter into discussions with current tenants about relocating back, I'm sure you can imagine that potentially facing more than doubling of the current rent is not necessarily something that would actually be favorable to some of the tenants. Has there been any discussion with HPD about whether or not the tenants that are currently there would get a preference in the lottery beyond what is already offered?
I'm not sure if they can get a preference in the lottery, and as of now, we haven't had discussions with HPD, but we could about doing that, yes.
So, you started off basically saying that, I think you used the word replicated, that the MIH units would basically replicate what's there for rent-regulated tenants. And I would just caution you to not use that word. I think it would be more helpful to do what you just did, which was break out what the rents currently are and what the size of those units are and what the rents would be in the future and the size. Just because the units in the future may be larger and maybe either comparable or even less in rent doesn't mean that the current tenants would necessarily benefit from that future affordability. So it's replicated maybe for someone else, but not for those folks.
Understood.
Other questions? Commissioner Levin?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the detail of the information that you brought us. And if you have it in a written form, it would be helpful to have it so we can think about it. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm sure you heard my comments on Monday about what the development scenario would look like with Lot 27 in place, and you showed a rendering that didn't look nearly as bad as I thought it was going to. So if you could provide those side-by-side rendering, that would be good.
Certainly.
But I guess my substantive point is to follow up on the conversation with Commissioner De La Uz, and point out that one other way to address the affordability question here is to accede to the Borough President's request that there be 10 additional permanently affordable units. There is some logic to that request, and I wonder if that's something your client has considered and can agree to.
That's something that we'll have to take a closer look at.
Okay. Thank you.
Question?
Just to clarify, but I don't have a particular disagreement on the zoning context, especially in comparison to where it is. Just to go back to the current tenants that are rent regulated, mm-hmm. You had thrown out some numbers, but you had not said what price range you were offering them to get back into the building?
Those discussions haven't taken place yet, as none of the tenants have actually asked to come back in. I'm just saying that our client's open to it, and should tenants want to be relocated back in, there would be a negotiation with each one to come to a below market rent that would be agreed to.
So if you could shed some light on those numbers, it'll help give us some clarity.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
And I guess we also have to think about temporary relocation space, because it's not a simple thing to relocate from a building that's been demolished into a new building that isn't going to exist for several years.
Understood.
Mr. Eggers, while you have that, those two renderings up, could you or either the architect just describe the two depictions there and what's going on?
Sure. So each building complies with the C19A contextual bulk regulations. The regulations set a maximum base height for buildings that provide affordable housing of 155 feet, and there's a required 10-foot setback, which is provided, and the maximum building height is 230 feet or 23 stories, and this is 23 stories and 230 feet. So that's the bulk parameters that the building's complying with.
But the two...
One's without 27.
Okay. So the 27 is between the two
Yes.
massings?
Yes.
Okay. So without it, it radically, well, not radically, but it changes the design somewhat.
Well, it makes it 25 feet thinner. Doesn't change the height or really much else. And these are preliminary renderings. The building hasn't been fully designed. This is really for illustrative purposes.
I see. Okay. Questions?
Yeah, just one quick question. Do both of these scenarios utilize the full FAR available to the respective developments?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I kind of like the design on the cantilevered building.
Take note.
I'm sure the developers appreciate that, Mr. Dwyer.
Wait.
Commissioner Levin.
Could I just, so the skinny scenario on the right eliminates the cantilever on the left? Is that just because you have less floor area and you don't need to do the cantilever? Or
That's right.
Has the architect perhaps made the skinny building as attractive as possible to get us to calm down about what happens if you don't acquire lot 27?
I believe it just involves utilizing the available floor area, making sure that it can all be accommodated in the building.
Okay, and this also uses the purchased development rights?
Yes.
Both scenarios use the full amount that
Yes.
have been purchased?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Efron.
Can you just be specific about where the 16,000 square feet are coming from?
Yes, it's lot 23, which is the building, if you're looking at the rendering on the right, it's the building immediately to the left of the proposed new building.
So that's the cantilevered.
In the scenario on the left, yes.
Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Eggers or any member of the team, I suppose? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now hear from those in opposition, starting with Panos Koutris.
Hello again. Good afternoon this time. My name is Panos Koutris. I'm here on behalf of the residential member of Local 32BJ, over 30,000 people who clean, maintain, and provide concierge service at apartment buildings throughout this great city. New York's cost of living is one of the highest in the country, and we believe that working people should not be asked to do more with less. We believe that the developers should commit to providing good building service jobs that pay workers the industry standard prevailing wage and benefits. Unfortunately, 33rd Street Acquisition LLC, an affiliate of Excel, has not made a commitment to providing the hard-working men and women of this city with good building service jobs that would help them put extra food on the table and save a little bit more for retirement. This development should not undercut the standards that building service workers have fought for. That is why we are urging the board to vote no on this project. Thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you. Questions? Thank you, sir. Tara DeVivier.
Hello again. Good Good afternoon. I'm Tara DeVivier, urban planner on behalf of the Manhattan Borough President Gail A. Brewer, to speak in opposition to the zoning map amendment and the text amendment to facilitate the development of a 23-story mixed-use building on East 33rd Street. While there is a growing need for affordable housing throughout this city, this office does not believe that the application should be approved, as the applicant has failed to demonstrate that they are able to build the project as proposed. This office also believes rezoning the remaining low-rise buildings not within the proposed development is almost certain to place current tenants and current rent-regulated units at risk. Manhattan Borough President staff, in an effort to gain a better understanding of the project and its potential impacts, visited the sites where it was discovered that one of the buildings to be demolished in the proposed development, 345 East 33rd Street, known as Lot 27, was undergoing extensive renovation and leasing to new tenants, which raises serious doubts to this office that the applicant will be able to acquire the site. If this application is approved and the site is not acquired, this would create a serious non-contextual issue on the street, leaving a 4-story building sandwiched between much taller buildings. This would not be appropriate for any neighborhood and would create significant inconsistencies on this block with respect to streetscape and building type. Contextual considerations aside, there are also issues around tenant protection and displacement that also concern this office. Staff also spoke with the remaining existing tenants in the building, tenants in the buildings that encompass the proposed development, and found that they were experiencing issues such as lack of heat, roach infestations, and difficulty in obtaining lease renewals, which are required under rent stabilization law. On the site not currently owned by the applicant, our site observed significant amounts of construction dust and noise. Tactics like this were recently outlined in an extensive New York Times investigation into the significant decline of rent-regulated units in the city, a main resource of below-market rate apartments for all New Yorkers. There are 60 other rent-regulated units that would be affected by this rezoning. While we do have a need for more housing, we can't be willfully ignorant by moving forward with rezoning this area without ensuring it is not at the expense of the very people we want to build housing for. This rezoning could result in the creation of permanently affordable units, but they would not be additional affordable units created for this community, which it needs, and it would be at the expense of displacing households presently living in below market rate units.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Vivier? Commissioner De La Luz.
First, I don't know, is this the first time that you come before us?
No.
I'm sorry. I know you were here
I'm
earlier.
still relatively new, but no, this is
here
my
earlier
first time.
today, but I know that. I was going to say welcome anyway. I just want to say I appreciate that the staff went to the buildings to knock on the doors. I think, obviously the developer's attorney, countered some of that information, but I think it's really important that that outreach was done, and I just wanted to say I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Please.
You spoke so quickly, I think you said that the significant construction is coming from the site not owned?
Yes, not owned by the applicant. So the site that he is trying to acquire in order to build the building to the left, right now, considering a site that you would think is going to be in negotiations to be sold, why would it be going under extensive renovations if the idea is ultimately that it's going to be sold and demolished? So we don't believe that he's going to acquire the site, so you're going to create a contextual situation, as you can see on the right. And then on top of that, you have tenants who are currently living in that building, both market rate and rent regulated, that are experiencing significant noise and dust issues.
Thank you.
Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. The report that we read said that if they did control the site, including the 4-story 27, then this would be in context, according to
Yes, it would be in context.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there are multiple reasons, but definitely one reason contextually we have a concern, and then also in the potential risk of further displacement of the tenants on the lots that are not in the proposed development, but that are part of the rezoning. That's our other concern.
Yeah, got that part. Thank you.
Commissioner Levin.
I guess I have a comment for Mr. Eggers, who's still in the back of the room. When you send us further information, just laying out the information you gave us about the units in the existing buildings, if you could copy that also to the Borough President's office.
Thank you.
And give them a chance to reconsider this, or look at this issue again with this new information. Thank you.
And that would include, hopefully, a definitive status on the question of Lot 27.
That too, as much as you can say.
Yeah. Other questions?
should just say you speak so fast was a compliment.
I know I'm trying to, it's last time, I think the first time I went over, now I'm trying to
You came
stay
in
within my
36
time.
seconds on the budget.
All right. Thank
This from someone who speaks very fast.
I mean, if you're a native New Yorker, that's what we do.
Okay.
All right.
Other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next, we will hear from speakers in favor, starting with Michael Lewin, followed by Stephen Smith, followed by Ben Carlos Thigpen, I believe it is.
Hi, I am Michael Lewin. I am a member of the group Open New York, committed to building more housing in New York to lower rents, and I'm also a professor at Toro Law Center, and I'm also sort of a neighborhood resident. I live at 38th and Park, which is about 5 blocks away. I support this project for 2 reasons. First, as a general matter, I think the city needs new housing, as I suspect most people in this room would agree. Second, I also favor this project as a matter of fairness. The New York tradition over the past 10 or 20 years seems to have been, let's upzone poor neighborhoods and downzone rich ones, like Kips Bay, where this project is. And so that's led to a lot of concerns about displacement and gentrification. In the Jackson Heights hearing, which we saw of an hour ago, we heard a lot of these complaints. And so I think the best way to deal with those kind of concerns is to build more housing in neighborhoods like Kips Bay so that fewer people will be priced out of Kips Bay and move to gentrify places like Jackson Heights. It seems to me the major argument against this project, as far as I can tell, is really about context. I mean, leaving aside some of the very technical issues about the current tenants, which I think council is presumably for the developer is going to deal with. There's a lot of concern about context. And so I have a tiny bit of firsthand knowledge about this in this sense. I live in a 22-story building on a block on the East 38th, on a block that's full of 2-, 3-, 4-story buildings. And it's perhaps not completely contextual, but the lion seems to lie down perfectly well with the lamb, as the Bible says. That is to say, it's a beautiful block, despite the fact that the buildings aren't all the same. And so I think if there happens to be a large building next to some small buildings, I think it will all be perfectly fine. So on that note, rather than taking any additional time, I will be happy to allow additional time for further speakers so that we can all get to lunch.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Lewin? Commissioner?
Open New York is a coalition. Could you just give one sentence that explains what it is?
Yes, it is a small group of, I would say concerned citizens, because presumably if they're apathetic citizens, they wouldn't be going to the meetings. I'm not sure we're big enough to really constitute a coalition. And actually, I think we have a couple of other speakers who will talk about the organization in more detail.
Thank you. Thank you for your modesty.
Commissioner Dweck.
Thank you for elucidating the need for affordable housing in the Kips Bay neighborhood. Do you have any historical data that you could provide on the recent projects that have included it, have created affordable housing, or perhaps my commissioner to my right would have the answer?
We can look it up.
I don't really have any neighborhood-specific data. I know certainly in terms of the city as a whole, the housing supply has lagged behind the number of jobs. I think something like 800,000 jobs have been added to the city in the past 20 years. And typically there's been, I'd say, about 15,000 to 20,000 new housing units per year.
Other questions? Thank you. Stephen Smith?
Hello, commissioners. Normally when this commission is being asked to vote on projects, they are in poor and gentrifying neighborhoods. So I commend the developer for his boldness in proposing something that goes against an unwritten rule in American land use: never rezone wealthy residential neighborhoods. Michael mentioned the last 10 or 20 years. I think this goes back to 1916, and it's let's say, unfortunate and vaguely anti-Semitic origins. It is imperative, if we're going to reverse a century of exclusionary land use practices, to challenge this. Secondly, I'd like to address something that a commissioner said about neighborhood context. As you're all surely aware, the initial development pattern in Manhattan was generally single-family homes and tenements. If this commission had been around generations ago and held developers to the same standards, Midtown would have no skyscrapers, Flatbush would have no would still be detached single-family homes, and Wall Street would still be Federalist-style townhouses as well, probably without even any retail, since they were generally built as mansions. Cities grow and change, or at least they should. We shouldn't be held to the highest and best use as determined by 19th century speculative builders. I'd also like to address something else. I didn't write this, but Gail Brewer was concerned that if the second thing is built, there'll be a small building next to a tall building. If you want a uniform cornice line, you can go to Paris, where the whole city was rebuilt in an urban development scheme in the 1800s. But this is New York. Tall buildings coexist next to short buildings all the time. Eventually, if if that area is given the R10 equivalent zoning, that smaller building will be redeveloped. I think that a diversity of different buildings built in different eras is not a bad thing. I don't think everything has to be necessarily built out at the same time in the same style. And then finally, I noticed that in a recommendation, Borough President Brewer mentioned that the rest of the block might be a target for future rezonings. In the spirit of citywide planning that a lot of Jackson Heights opponents mentioned, I would hope that the city would initiate this and not wait until developers, not wait and react to other developers. I think, given the tall buildings to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, it would be appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Smith?
Do you live within the community board?
No, I could never afford to live here. I mean, maybe I could if I want an affordable unit.
Let's hope so.
Other questions for Mr. Smith? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ben Carlos Thipin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Ben Carlos Typin, and I'm here in two capacities to testify in favor of the proposed project. First, but not foremost, I'm here as a resident of this neighborhood. I live several blocks away and welcome the new neighbors that this development would allow to move into my high-opportunity neighborhood, which has great schools, safe streets, and great transit connectivity. Furthermore, as a renter myself, I welcome the new rental supply in my neighborhood because the shiny new units in the proposed building would make it less likely that I get outbid for my apartment, which is in a small building that dates to the 19th century. Second, I am here as an organizer for Open New York, the group that Michael mentioned before. We are an independent pro-housing activist group that agitates for rich neighborhoods to build more housing in order to integrate those neighborhoods, take pressure off of gentrifying neighborhoods, and lower overall rents. Our group has been active on this project for months, and I'd like to take this as an opportunity to provide some context on how the community board meetings on this matter played out. Up until the first of our members were permitted to speak, every comment, whether from the committee or wealthy neighboring homeowners, were uniformly aesthetic in nature and mostly preposterous. Once our members began speaking out about how the supply added by the proposed project would make the neighborhood more affordable, especially once it became clear that we were outnumbering the opposition speakers, this encouraged even more outrageous comments by the committee members and homeowners. Our members were mocked for our perceived ages, our perceived incomes, and accused of being carpetbaggers from outside the neighborhood. The last charge is one that I'll come back to in a moment. We're quite confident that our overwhelming presence at that land use meeting is the primary reason that the full board's resolution opposed the project without increasing affordability. We're confident because we were at the full board meeting, and while the drafting of the resolution was taking place, the drafters literally said to us, "See, we're concerned about affordability." I'll leave it to you as to whether you think their affordability condition is sincere or merely a poison pill to kill the project. Now, as to the charge made by both the community board and by Borough President Brewer's office that our members who spoke out in favor of this project are not from the community, my response to that is, so what? Housing markets are regional, and we've been in a housing crisis for decades, largely because only lower income and less politically powerful neighborhoods than Kips Bay have been forced to bear the burden of housing supply growth. One of our members who spoke out in favor of the proposed project had already been gentrified out of a building a few blocks away and into a neighborhood in Brooklyn, where he no doubt displaced someone even more vulnerable than him. Several of our other members who spoke in favor of the project are from neighborhoods to the south, like the East Village and Lower East Side, who are concerned that if a richer neighborhood like Kips Bay doesn't build enough housing, would-be residents of Kips Bay would instead move into the East Village or Lower East Side and outbid them for their apartments, making them gentrifiers of neighborhoods in Brooklyn, displacing vulnerable residents in those neighborhoods. In closing, as a citywide commission, I urge you to take a holistic view of the project's impact on our city's housing affordability and approve it in a manner which doesn't sacrifice any homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Efron.
Just a comment, and thank you. Though the land use process involves community boards as a way of gathering information, I think we all do take our citywide responsibility very seriously, and we appreciate, at least I appreciate, your explaining the connectivity of all land use actions. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mark Weprin.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, hi, I'm Mark Weprin. How are you? I am a partner at Greenberg Traurig, actually, and work with Dan Eggers. I wanted to come here today on a couple of reasons. First, in a previous life, as you may know, I was in the city council and worked on the MIH. I wasn't there actually when it was voted on, but I worked with Carl Ricebrod as chair of the zoning committee and was very proud of this historic change of law. It really is a miraculous thing. I have been on the sidelines watching in disappointment as a number of projects have gotten voted down by my former colleagues, and realized that, you know, it's very important that we focus on the prize here, which is this historic legislation which will help develop affordable units, permanent affordable units, not subject to Albany's whims. I'm familiar with those as well. This site, as was mentioned in Dan's presentation, by the way, Dan did a phenomenal job, and you should know that recently his wife gave birth to that first child, so he did that sleepless as well. But this site, you know, is under the current zoning, is less than 50% of the allowable FAR, so they really are soft sites. So these sites can be developed, they can be doubled in size, so that is going to happen. So here we have an opportunity to have 40 brand new permanent affordable housing, modern, safe places to live where every tenant is going to qualify under an income level. Nobody who's living in this house is going to have an income that's beyond what the average person would want to see in one of these houses. And I understand the landlord's working very hard with the tenants to try to make sure that issue is resolved. I do want to address quickly 32 BJ who came here today. The developer is getting a 421A tax abatement. We will be paying prevailing wage. We had a meeting with 32 BJ, a preliminary meeting. We expect we'll come to a resolution and they will be here hopefully in favor of it in the future. But we are aware of that and the importance of good affordable jobs. So with this, in my opinion, this is exactly what the MIH wanted to develop. It's contextual. I understand there's some issues, but in general, this is a perfectly contextual building, not overly large, a chance to put in affordable housing and to improve a neighborhood. So to me, this sounds like a perfect example of where MIH could work and where we have a great responsibility. And I would love to see the commission accept and vote yes on creating these 40 permanent affordable housing units. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weprin. Questions?
Thank you very much, and I love the place, and I like the fact that in the bathroom they pump the sound into there. That's really impressive. Thank you very much.
No, did I? Are there any other speakers on this item? Any other speakers? If there is not, this hearing is closed. Madam Secretary.
Yes.
Is there any other business before the commission today?
No, Vice Chair. No.
Are you certain of that, Madam Secretary?
Yep, final answer.
All righty. And that question, the public hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
All right, we did it.